Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 651 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And the Russians, they're freezing.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine here on day 651. And we have some really interesting news. We have started to see some information coming out that is most likely suggesting that Russian forces are once again poorly prepared for winter and are starting to suffer some sort of symptoms of hypothermia or other kinds of ailments similar to it. And we've also seen that the Ukrainian forces around Avdiivka in particular have begun to counterattack and start to take ground back from the Russians, at least in small form. And not only that, this has produced some incredibly high casualties for Russian armed forces as of today, with nearly 1,300 Russian soldiers being killed over the past 24 hours. But there is a lot to cover over the past just day of conflict, and not only that, we actually have to go outside of Ukraine for a moment and into an entirely other part of the world, because the war has actually moved on down here today, at least on the international diplomatic sphere, and into the Middle East. Because we saw today that Vladimir Putin, the dictator, the devil himself, has actually traveled into the Middle East to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia on diplomatic visits. And this is something a little shocking. We also got to see some footage of the Su-35s. Apparently his jet was escorted by 4 Su-35 fighters, and the Russian Ministry of Defense put out a video showing these Su-35s. Now, if we look at these, they said that they have been equipped with some of the latest and greatest Russian missiles that could be mounted on board an aircraft. When we're looking at them, I would have to say that's not really the case. This appears to be an R-73 Archer, which has been in service with the Soviet Union since about the 1980s, really, the very early 1980s, and this appears to be some kind of an R-27 variant of an air-to-air missile. This one does appear to be slightly modern than the normal variants that we see used by Russian aircraft in Ukraine. Usually those are R-27ERs, which were introduced in the service once again around the late 70s and the early 80s, but still, these aren't exceptionally modern missiles. And there's also an interesting thing to note that they have a limited number of them. This Su-35 in particular appears to only be carrying 2 R-73s and 2 R-27 variant missiles, which is an incredibly small amount considering that an Su-27 series, or really this Su-35, can carry somewhere around 8 missiles total. It's only carrying half of its allowable payload. We can once again see them showing off the missiles. We now see the Su-35s taking off. And the camera pans in to watch them flying off the distance. We can see the next flight of Su-35s taking off that are going to be a part of the escort, and we now see some footage that was apparently taken from a following aircraft of the Ilyushin 96 that Putin was in, being accompanied by the 4 Su-35s. We can see 2 of them on each side of the aircraft.
This must be the real Putin, or otherwise they wouldn't go through this much trouble to make sure that he's safe.
Oh, this was the real Putin today. We can see them flying over the Abu Dhabi airport.
Why are they putting so much effort into filming the escort going to the Middle East? Because, you know, Putin rarely ever gets out. So, you know, they're putting all this effort into this, and meanwhile, they're not focused on Putin actually going somewhere.
It's a propaganda thing, Matthew. You gotta show the Russian public that Russia is strong. You know, and what better way to do it than having 4 of Russia's finest Su-35s flying them over there into Abu Dhabi. But you know what's really weird to me is that while this is, of course, obviously filmed like a propaganda flick, one big question to me is, wouldn't it have been better looking for him to be escorted by 4 Su-57s? Which are the only stealth aircraft that the Russians supposedly have. And if you know anything about radar cross-sections, you'll know that the Su-57 isn't stealth. It actually has the same radar cross-section as an F-15, which is considered a non-stealth fighter aircraft. But regardless of that, this doesn't really do much to me to show that the Russians are strong. It does show, however, that some of their higher-end aircraft they have not been using inside of Ukraine at all, that may have been able to help them, I don't know, maybe push forward a little bit in some extra areas. Instead, they decided to keep a little honor guard of some of their finest aircraft, so that way they could escort Vladimir Putin to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Another thing, and I saw someone say, where are the Su-57s? And here's the reality behind the Su-57s and why no one has ever really seen them. They don't work. Like everything the Russians have made in the 21st century, this aircraft really only exists in its prototyping phase, and there hasn't been any real production series of this aircraft that has been usable. Out of the entire Russian Air Force, there's assumed to only be around 8 of these that are production series aircraft and another 4 of them that are prototypes. We have never seen the 8 production series Su-57s ever being put into combat action inside of Ukraine. There's never been any proof of that. And also, based off of the numbers that the Sukhoi company has given to the public, which speaks about the Su-57's radar cross-section, because they wanted to declassify to talk about how late and great the Su-57 is compared to its Western counterparts, this thing has a cross-section of 0.04. The F-15, which is not a stealth aircraft and is one of the major air superiority fighters that's still in service with the U.S. Air Force, it has a cross-section of 0.04 as well. So in the effort that Sukhoi was trying to make to show that the aircraft was stealth, they actually showed that it was anything but stealth. It's not stealth at all. But regardless, you don't see these anywhere because they don't really exist. The only place they exist is on the internet in pictures like these. The finest aircraft the Russians really do have, as far as an air superiority fighter that is flying, are the Su-35s, like we just saw in the video. These are about the best, and what they really are is just a moderately upgraded version of the Su-27, which has been in some form of service since the very early 1980s in the Soviet Union. So they're not new at all, they're not really that impressive, but the Russians really did pull out the stops and tried to make it look like it was an impressive feat to have these things escorting Putin's plane. After the little diplomatic visit he had in the United Arab Emirates, they then flew to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and he then visited the Saudi royal family. Actually, sorry, correction, this was according to the caption in Abu Dhabi. For some reason, I just assumed since he was talking to the Arab Prince of Saudi Arabia that it would have been in Riyadh. But nevertheless, this is in Abu Dhabi again, and we can see Putin disembarking the Ilyushin 96. Now, a little fun fact to share with y'all while we watch him disembark from the plane. Some of y'all may have never even heard of an Ilyushin 96 being a passenger plane before, and it seems like a pretty far-flung thing, and you're probably wondering, why are none of these used in the West? Well, because when Ilyushin tried to market their aircraft to Western nations, it was usually smacked down because it met almost no safety requirements that are in place in aviation in the West. It is a very unsafe plane by Western standards, but of course, Putin and Russia trying to act like Russia is just the leader in everything, they end up using an Ilyushin 96 like this one. But still, just an interesting.
They're trying to project like they're wealthy and stuff like that. But in the meantime, you have Putin getting off the jet, literally sniffing like a bloodhound for money. That's probably why he's going here.
Oh, he is, because look at where he's going. He's going to the OPEC countries. He's trying to go down there and go, listen, everyone, I know that all of y'all know that the Russians are pretty scammy people. Y'all have all even said that as well, although we're all a part of OPEC. However, we should raise the oil price so that way Russia can make a little bit more money. That's probably what he's going around and saying right now, and I wouldn't doubt it if the Saudis and the UAE actually deny that request at the moment, because it wouldn't make any sense. They clearly are U.S. leaning at this moment. The Saudis certainly are with what's going on in the Middle East at the moment with the Houthis and everyone else, and the UAE really has no reason to be pro-Russia, because you see there's also a small little dynamic going on down here in the Middle East that I haven't mentioned and not a lot of people talk about, is that Iran and Saudi Arabia are actually playing their own power game in the Middle East at the moment. The Iranian Ayatollah has actually bashed the Saudi royal family, and then the Saudi royal family bashed the Ayatollah in return and called him a clown and a fool. That was about a year and a half ago, and since then, their relationship has greatly deteriorated. The UAE is largely happy with being a American-aligned country in the Middle East, and based out of where the Russians have put themselves, which is a purchaser of arms from Iran, and not only that, an ally of Iran, it's probably safe to assume that the Saudis are not going to want to raise oil prices as an OPEC collective because it's going to benefit a country that is actively supporting Iran, which is anti-Saudi Arabian. So I'm going to assume that we're probably not going to see anything come out of these talks, rather than Putin just kind of visiting the area and using his OPEC sway to just kind of get a little bit of a vacation for a moment. But I don't think this is going to be changing anything in the Middle East, and I'm sure that Saudi Arabia and the UAE are most likely going to keep the oil prices where they are right now, and also keep American aligned, because why wouldn't they? It would make no sense. But moving on from that little bit of news out there in the Middle East at the UAE, it's time for us to get back into Ukraine, and specifically into something I've heard today. I've heard several different things, but I have heard that apparently there was a $175 million package that has been approved for U.S. support to Ukraine. It's a smaller package, but it's still better than nothing. And I have also heard that there's been some issues with providing permanent support to Ukraine again. We're not going to be covering that much, but I've heard two separate things today, and I just want to make sure to touch base with y'all on that and let y'all know what I've heard. But we're just going to leave that for what it is and keep on getting on into the news. Moving on towards the Ukrainian border with Poland, there's been a situation that we haven't been covering much, and it's kind of important to backtrack now and tell y'all about it. There are a lot of labor unions that exist in the former Warsaw Pact, and not only that, in a lot of Western European countries as well. Labor unions, unlike in the United States, are actually an incredibly common thing in Europe and really exist in nearly every industry imaginable, including the trucking industry. And some of these countries that border Ukraine, like Poland and Slovakia, have started to have some inherent issues, apparently, with their trucking industry. Of course, we can't really go into it much because it may become a political issue for those countries that are involved. But because of these underlying issues that have been complained about, the trucking unions of Poland have actually begun to blockade the highways leading into Ukraine, so that way they can try and have their demands met by the Polish government and also the trucking companies they're employed by. This has also started to span possibly into Slovakia, as news started to come out today that some of the major leading trade unions in Slovakia, according to some complaints that they have, and we will not go into, may possibly begin to blockade all of the entrances into Ukraine through Slovakia as well until their demands are met. This, of course, does pose an issue in providing supplies to Ukraine, not just military supplies, but also humanitarian supplies as well. It puts very serious pressure on the governments involved, such as Ukraine, Poland, and Slovakia, and it really is a hardline tactic by the trade unions to try and have their demands met. We have seen that the Ukrainians and the Poles have started to try and get workarounds to this as best as they possibly can, and they've begun to load the semi-trucks onto trains because the railroad workers are not striking at the moment, and they're bringing in the trucks into Ukraine by train. And we can see a picture of that right there. It's just one picture, but all they're doing is they're literally just taking the semis that cannot get to the border because the highways are blockaded right now. They're loading them up onto trains, and then they just send them across the border that way. It's pretty interesting to see that they're trying to find a workaround. Hopefully it's effective, and it'll work for them long term, because it's a bizarre one, I have to say, and I don't know how long it takes to unload and offload all of these trucks onto each and every train. But hopefully some agreement can be reached where the blockade ends, and hopefully one doesn't begin in Slovakia either, because, of course, that could start to pose some issues long term, and we do not want those issues to become prevalent ones by any means at all. But moving on from that little bit of news, I see some people saying the trade unions support Russia. No, it's a lot more complicated than that. And I'll try and explain a little bit of it, of course, not getting into their domestic politics because we have a no politics rule. But according to the Polish trade unions, the truck drivers are being overworked with incredibly long hours, and they're not being compensated properly for it. That's really what the strike is coming from. And whether that is a merit or not, I'm not going to say, because that could start getting into a political realm. But that is currently their complaint. They don't really have any complaints that they don't like Ukraine and they want to screw them over. That's not really what the trade unions are going for. And we've had similar things like that happening here in the United States recently. Some of y'all may remember that it was about last year that a lot of the railroad workers around the United States started to go on strike. I believe it was last year before the holidays. They were going to go on strike, but then the U.S. government intervened and said that anyone who did strike was going to be arrested and put in, most likely had federal charges pressed against them. So nobody striked and the railroads went on their way. And then that's when we heard about everything happening in East Palestine, Ohio, and everywhere else, because the railroad workers were striking over the conditions of the railroads and saying that they were being poorly maintained. But we can't get into that any further. But that was the issue back during that time, and it was just brushed aside, and no strike happened. Usually the strikes are kind of a little bit of a coincidental thing. And in Poland and Slovakia's instance, it does sound like the claims of these trade unions are not related at all to any kind of a pro-Russian sentiment. It's more so about working conditions and compensation for their work. So, that's all I can really tell you. I can't really go into anything beyond that, and I hope everyone does respect our no politics rule, because, we always try and make sure that we don't get involved in any kind of partisan politics. I try and explain how it works a little bit, because I can see some people thought it was a pro-Russian thing. From what I can tell, it isn't. It's just more so of a workers' rights kind of thing, as usual, as it usually is for the trade unions. But moving on from that, speaking of unions, it appears that the Ukrainian air defense in Kyiv banded together in a bit of a union to shoot down some incoming drones overnight. And it was very interesting to see, because we had a load of different kinds of air systems working in this one clip. We hear the sound of the Gepard roaring.
That's the Gepard firing?
Yeah, oh, look at that. That was like a 2.5 mile shot right there, and they got it. Oh my lord.
That Gepard has a nice, crispy firing sound. I like it.
Oh, it's beautiful sounding. I love the Gepard. And now we can see a SAM system firing.
Sam, what you want that a hot dog, Sam?
What you doing with that hot dog, Sam? And dang, that thing's going over the horizon nearly.
Hey, wait a minute, come back. He's going too far. Dang, where's it going?
Damn, it was that far away?
Way out there.
That had to have been like 30 kilometers away. That was one hell of a trip for that missile to take right there. And it still hit whatever the target was. It was most likely a Shahed 136. But really something to see the air defense and all of the different kinds that were just in this one video working in unison to shoot down all of the incoming drones. And it was, of course, wildly successful. From what we understand, they were able to shoot down all incoming air targets overnight, and that is always a great thing to hear. We love to hear it. I know y'all love to hear it. It's a wonderful thing. But moving on from that, I do have to say that we have had some pretty interesting stuff just in general inside of Ukraine today. And make sure, by the way, to stick around, because I'm going to be making our way systematically through the news from our location unknowns to the northern front and then into Avdiivka. But Avdiivka is kind of the biggest area of the battlefield tonight once more. A lot of losses came from that area of the battlefield today. Not only that, we also heard some pretty wild stuff about the Russians possibly suffering some major cases of unit-wide hypothermia in that area, and it seems as though it's getting so bad the Russians have introduced a new kind of a technological innovation to try and provide some kind of emergency aid to some of these units that may be suffering from severe hypothermia. But we'll be getting to that in a little bit, so just make sure to stick around for that. Meanwhile, we're going to be getting into our location unknowns and starting off with our first little picture of some very obscure volunteer nations. Of course, there are volunteers from all around the world, and I'm sure y'all have heard of the big ones. The Polish volunteers, the American volunteers, the British ones, the French ones, which there were a decent amount of, the German ones. But we don't really hear a lot about Indian volunteers. There are very few Indian volunteers from what we understand in the International Legion. And so it's pretty nice to see that we actually have some representation of the Indian part of the International Legion here in this picture. And not only that, but also an Italian guy. Pretty cool, because we also don't hear a lot about Italian volunteers in the International Legion either. It's just pretty cool to see that people from all around the world, even countries we don't really hear much about in support of Ukraine, are over there and parts of the International Legion and continuing on the struggle against the Russians to hold Ukrainian land for Ukraine itself. Really cool to see, and I gotta say,
it's kind of interesting about the Indian guy, because isn't India kind of a little bit on the fence about Ukraine? They're really not supporting Ukraine. They're kind of sort of leaning pro-Russian, aren't they?
And they're more so neutral, because they don't really want to go all out of their way to support Ukraine. But we can also see that they have made official statements that have condemned what the Russians are doing, but they don't do it that heavily, and they don't get into that a lot. because right now they are benefiting greatly off of the resource collapse, or more so the market collapse that the Russians had in all of these Western nations, buying their natural gas, their oil, their timber, and everything else. Once all Western countries stopped purchasing that, the prices in Russia plummeted, and the Indians became the major market for Russian exports of cheap natural resources. And so that's why we haven't ever seen the Indians just get all on board on condemning Russia and supporting Ukraine, is because they're in a little bit of a catch. India's economy is rapidly growing at this point, and they're trying to keep that going, and that requires a massive amount of raw materials, and right now they're able to get that at discount prices from the Russians. So they're trying to not screw their own strategic interest over, or their economic interest over long term, so they're kind of walking a tightrope right now and making sure that they don't condemn the Russians enough and they don't support Ukraine enough. So it is really weird to see an Indian volunteer, considering the geopolitical situation that the Indians are currently in.
It is interesting. Also, it's just interesting overall to see the foreign volunteers still going over to Ukraine, because when you really think about it, like, these guys obviously had lives just like anybody else, and they just decided to uproot their life, go to Ukraine and start fighting in a foreign war in a foreign land. That's just really, like, astonishing to see. It really goes to show you how, like, strong they believe in the cause to be able to go just do that.
Yeah, it is. It's wild, and also it's going kind of against the grain a little bit. A lot of people are saying a lot of Indians online support Russia. I've largely seen that as well. I don't know if that's a nationwide thing in India. I haven't really looked into India enough to tell y'all whether the internet community of Indians is representative of all of India, or if it's just a small niche that has internet access, you know, to the rest of the world, and so that's why they're out there being so vocal in support of Russia. I can't really say anything in that regard. And I know that we also have Indian viewers as well. We have a few of them. So I can't really say that for certain, but it's still very bizarre to see an Indian international volunteer. There's just so few of them, and seeing a picture of one is really neat. And also the Italian guy, he's just over there vibing. And I gotta say, you go, little guy, you go. But anyways,
Yes.
with that, we're moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we got to see a compilation of the SBU destroying some Russian vehicles, and it was nice. Ooh, they got that techno playing. Anyone like RoboCop? And there goes the bomblet, right down on the APC. Oh my lord. That looks like it may have been an engine bay explosion. I don't know how that happened, but it was from the engine bay. We can now see a Mr. S getting hit directly on top of the turret, which will probably cause a critical ammo detonation here in a second. And it looks like it has. And we now see a Gyansen S getting hit as well. That is the self-propelled version of the Gyansen B. And y'all know something that I've started to realize throughout the war? It just hit me right now. Like, all of the mobile versions of artillery pieces have S behind them. So you have Mista B, which is, you know, the towed version of the Mista SPG, and then the one that is actually tracked, you know, the Mista S, it has S behind it. And then the Gyansen follows the same rule. There's the Gyansen B and the Gyansen S, and the Gyansen S is the wheeled SPG version. So I think what we're starting to find out on the naming convention of Russian artillery pieces is that anything with a B behind it is towed artillery, anything with an S behind it is self-propelled artillery of the same gun, but, you know, just on a different platform. But we can see here Estrella 10 also getting stricken as well and blowing up. And we can see them just going for really everything. We didn't even get a description of that vehicle. It just, you know, effed around and found out. We can also see them dropping a bomblet onto a dugout, which it appears that it was evaporated. We can also see them doing it again. And can we see them doing it even another time? We can also see a Russian forces tank. They didn't really describe a lot about it, but it did get blown up. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but very nice to see that the SBU has been able to take out a lot of Russian vehicles over the past 24 hours or so, and hopefully this will be helping them out wherever those vehicles were destroyed. Moving on from that, we also get to see that Father Frost is out there, and he's living up to the Father Frost name. This is good. This is
The
good.
hell?
Кожного року по всій території України до чемних хлопчиків та дівчаток з повним мішком подарунків приходить Святий Миколай. за добрі вчинки протягом року і даруй маленьким і дорослим любов, радість, тепло та мир. Тільки загарбникам Миколай в День Збройних сил України принесе особливі подарунки, а птахи армійської авіації йому в цьому допоможуть.
I don't think that's Santa. I think that's Krampus.
Oh, Santa, what happened to you? What big teeth you have, Santa?
Oh my! It looks like Santa has turned into the devil incarnate. But you know, it could be worse. He could be Volodymyr Solovyov. But
This is the type Santa that says, not ho ho ho. It's the type Santa that says, you're a ho ho ho.
dude, this is the Santa that you see. You know what? We're gonna drop that joke because that ain't a good one. But man, and Santa's dishing out the
Let
coal.
the missiles fly, Santa. Santa's a savage out here.
I gotta tell you, absolutely busting it up. And I gotta say, very interesting to see. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Christmas wishes from the 12th Brigade. It looks like Santa's not handing out presents. He's not handing out coal. He's handing out straight up death. And I gotta say, didn't know Santa was a merchant of death, but apparently he's joined the Ukrainian army. But moving on from that, we also got to see the Russian losses of the past 24 hours. And oh my god, was it something?
Damn. That's fucking crazy, man. Good lord.
1,270 Russian soldiers have been lost over the past 24 hours. Pretty damn high, I have to say. And I've got to say, absolutely amazing to know that the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to manage such an effective defense, and not only just an effective defense, but also a very decent counterattack in some areas of Avdiivka today, that they were able to incredibly attrit Russian forces over the past 24 hours. This is one of the highest amounts of Russian losses we've seen in a single day. It's getting on up there towards being the highest day of losses we have seen so far. And it is amazing to see that the Ukrainians have done so well. Not only that, but they've destroyed 40 armored personnel carriers, an incredibly high number, along with nearly 50 supply trucks, along with 13 main battle tanks, 37 artillery systems, which is amazing. The counter battery did incredibly well today, 51 drones, 1 aircraft, and 5 special equipment vehicles. Overall, it's been very good, and I have to say that the Ukrainians are really setting the standard at this point in the war on what Russian losses look like. Amazingly enough, based off of historic standards, it's actually the latter part of wars that become the deadliest. That kind of sounds a little bit counterintuitive. You would think that when wars are winding down, they'd actually get less deadly, but as a matter of fact, the statistics show that as wars come to a close, they get deadlier and deadlier for really everyone involved. What's crazy is that nearly 60% of all losses that were sustained in the Second World War actually came from the last year and a half of the war. Not about the whole 6 years that the war was fought over from 1939 to 1945 in Europe. Most of the losses came from just the last year and a half alone. And that is just bizarre to think about. And it's also starting to become a little bit reflective in the Russian casualty report, because at the beginning of the war, for the Russians to lose about 600 guys in a day, that was really something. About at the early part of this year, to see the Russians losing about 1,000, it was nearly unheard of. That was an insane day of losses for the Russian army. Now at this point, for the Russians to lose around 1,100 guys in a day, that's actually considered normal. And we're now seeing that 1,300 is really starting to become the real limit of what is considered to be absolutely horrendous losses for the Russian army on a day-to-day basis. It's just bizarre. And also another thing that we've seen contributes to these incredibly high loss figures is that as the wars go on, armies become far larger, and not only that, not only do they become far larger, but usually the armed forces are less trained, and that always leads to inevitably higher casualties. Most militaries cannot keep up an incredibly high training rate for a long duration, especially to meet the numbers to be able to replenish their current size of their forces and also grow new brigades. So usually the training is sacrificed just for numbers, and we have seen that that's been the case in the Russian army for a while, and it does appear as time keeps going, their losses are significantly increasing, most likely in a direct correlation to a lack of training in the Russian armed forces, at least for the new units being introduced. But we're now going to be moving on from that casualty report and on into some very interesting things I've seen in the chat. One of the questions that we have asked tonight has actually been, from what I can tell, a little bit controversial. Some people were not happy with the question asked, but I would like to see what a lot
it was just one person. Yeah, that guy's he's just a little bit upset. That's all.
A little angry. A little angry. He's a little mad.
Why you mad, bro?
Why you mad? Why so mad? But anyways, we've got to see what all the fuss is about, because apparently these polls are just controversial, and not only that, highly suspect. But Matthew, what is the poll in question that was highly suspect? Because I gotta know.
All right, so to address the poll that's currently running, this is the one that is highly suspect or highly controversial. I have no idea why, but here's the question. It says, what do you think is the main reason people volunteer for the Ukrainian Foreign Legion? 68% said they're freedom fighters and they're trying to protect democracy. 15% said war junkies / adrenaline chasers. 11% said former military, and 6% said they have family in Ukraine or they're protecting friends. And on this one, I gotta say, to uproot your entire life and go to a foreign country so far away from most people to fight, I'm almost inclined to say that there may be war junkies, because, you know, there's plenty of people to fight in Ukraine already in this war. And I'm not saying that the foreign volunteers are, you know, not doing a good job. They are doing a good job. They're helping out Ukraine in a big way. But still, to leave your life in the West, that is a big commitment. So I'm going to be in the 15% that said war junkies, but I also do believe there's a big part of it that is the protect democracy side of it, but that may not be the primary motivation. But Enforcer, what say you?
It's, you know, I don't think there's a straightforward answer to this, because I'm sure that it's actually different from soldier to soldier. I have a feeling that a lot of them have gone over there for the reason of being a freedom fighter and protecting democracy, because we've seen that a lot of international Legion members don't actually have real connections to Ukraine. They just believe in the cause. So I think that's probably what's the case for the majority of them. I have a feeling that some of them are probably there because they have family in Ukraine. I have a feeling that that's actually a pretty decent reason that a lot of them are there as well. Former military, we have seen a decent amount of former military over there, just kind of there for the hell of it. And I do know some people who have friends that have volunteered in Ukraine. And to be honest with y'all, that really seems like the majority reason a lot of them are there. They just kind of enjoy war and they kind of want to have a little taste of it again. I know that that sounds weird, because a lot of people are like, war is hell, and yeah, but I guess some people enjoy that kind of thing, because from what I've heard, a lot of the people that I know, they're like, yeah, so-and-so volunteered and went over to Ukraine and joined the Legion. I'm like, really, why? And they're like, well, they just liked war, you know, they liked being in Afghanistan, or they liked being in Iraq, so they went over to Ukraine. I don't know how much they like Ukraine, though, because Iraq and Afghanistan were very different than what we're seeing in Ukraine right now. That was asymmetrical warfare, which was a lot less, it was very low intensity compared to what we're seeing in Ukraine right now, which is high intensity and nonstop. So don't really know how much they're enjoying that at the moment. But also,
you know, one thing I will say, that if somebody's former military and they want to go fight in Ukraine, I would actually understand that, because especially if they've been deployed and actually in a war, they've sort of gotten accustomed to that. And some soldiers can't come back and basically get accustomed to normal life again. They're sort of like always wanting to go back to war. So Ukraine might be giving them an outlet to go back right into it. And, you know, to them, that's something that they feel more comfortable in. So they go back to Ukraine. And, you know, if they feel more comfortable in the war zone, I mean, if it's helping out Ukraine, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's a perfectly good way to spend your time if you're, you know, willing to make that sacrifice. But it's definitely not a light decision to make.
It's certainly not light at all. And I would say, and also, Spong actually brought up a really good point. He said historically, like the Spanish Civil War, there are a lot of international volunteers, like in that instance. And that's true. There's just always a lot of international volunteers. It's a little weird to think about, because Like, for example, some of y'all know about the famous use. I know that the British here that are big history enthusiasts know about the Eagle Squadron, which was a squadron in the Royal Air Force in 1940, which was before the United States joined World War II, that was comprised entirely of American volunteer pilots. A lot of them actually resigned from the the Army Air Corps to go over to Britain and then join the Royal Air Force and help them to defend their skies. You'll also equally know about the Flying Tigers as well, which is the same thing but in East Asia. There's always a lot of volunteers, international volunteers, in some foreign wars. And what I'm about to tell y'all is going to blow you away. Y'all wouldn't believe it, but the most successful international legion, if you want to call it that, in world history. Matthew, do you want to take a guess at who it was?
And what was the question again?
What unit was the most successful at fostering an international legion?
Let me think. I would say maybe, it's going to be a wild answer, but I'm thinking maybe Germany back during World War II.
You're actually very warm. Would you like to try and name a specific unit?
I'm scared to name a specific unit, to be honest. What is it?
Yeah, I'm going to blow everyone's minds, and this is actually something that has been historically proven, and a lot of studies have been done about it, and it's just weird. It was the Waffen-SS.
I was about to say that,
Yeah,
but I wasn't sure.
It's bizarre, because I'll explain really quickly why that was the case. The Waffen-SS, while of course being massively evil, y'all can go and look at the Waffen-SS, and it's a whole thing. They had members from practically around the world. There were a few from the United States. Well, I think there was like 2 of them, so they don't really count. But they called them the George Washington Legion for propaganda reasons. There was also, I think actually there were none from Britain, which was shocking. There were a decent amount from France, a decent amount from the Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, Czechoslovakia. A lot of them from, really everywhere that was a part of the Soviet Union. There were members of the SS from Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine. There was also some from Spain and France. There was a good amount from Italy that actually went and joined the Waffen-SS. It was just bizarre. It was weird because literally countries that you wouldn't even think would have been in the SS were in there, like India. There was a decent amount of Indian members of the SS. And historically, it was actually the most successful by diversity margins because there were just so many different groups of people that were in the SS. It was the most successful. That's just a weird fact to know. And if you ever want to throw that out at a cocktail party, I'm sure people would be shocked by that fact. And it can be backed up. You can just mention specific groups. It's just weird. But nevertheless, it's true, Smog. There are a lot of foreign volunteers in every war. You can even see that in the Soviet Union and in the United States during World War II. There wasn't really a lot in the United States during World War II. We had a pretty good thing of just, having plenty of volunteers to the point that the Army stopped taking volunteers and just started drafting them so that way they could control the influx coming in. But beyond that, it's just interesting to think about with foreign volunteers, but I'm sure they all have many different reasons why they're there. It's probably not just one, but if we had to go with a single one to say why most of them are there, it's probably to be freedom fighters and to defend democracy around the world. But with that, also Terrence Custer said, talk about a conversation killer to bring up at a party. Yeah, but if you're ever just on the topic of war, you just want to pull one of those weird facts out that is really going to get everyone like, what? And then you can explain it. You could bring that out. I'm not saying that it's like the fun fact. It's obviously not a fun fact if you know anything about the SS, but it is a fact that people will be like, wait a minute, what? What do you mean? And then you can explain it. And they'll be like, that is bizarre. Like, another interesting fact to explain about World War II is that at the end of World War II, the Germans made about 5 different copies of the Sten gun that they had trashed on during all of World War II. The Germans hated the Sten gun that the British made. They said it was too simple, it was unreliable, and it sucked. And then by the end of the war, they had 5 different variants of the thing, and they were all last-ditch guns, which are also equally weird. Another weird thing to tell people about the Germans at the later end of World War II is that their clothes weren't even made out of the real fabric anymore. They were actually a form of papier-mâché.
Paper mache in Germany?
I'm not even kidding. Their uniforms at the end of the war were made out of some kind of a hybrid mix of like some fibers, but mostly paper. It was incredible.
That's interesting. Now, I will say that the main ones, the ones that like to take pictures of for propaganda, that their uniforms definitely weren't made out of paper mache. Those were quite fine made. I can't remember. Is it a myth or is it fact that the German uniforms at one point were made by Hugo Boss? Is that true or false?
they weren't designed by Hugo Boss, but Hugo Boss, the company, did manufacture a decent amount of the uniforms.
Interesting. I think they just designed it, didn't they? Or did they actually like manufacture them?
They didn't design them; they only manufactured them.
Interesting. Who designed it?
I don't really know. But also another thing to tell people, if you just want some fun facts, because like while the Germans were the most evil people during World War II, they were also the wackiest. Like the facts that come out of the Germans in World War II are just stupidly wacky because the people in charge of Germany were whack. But another interesting fact to know is that Porsche, the guy who, founded Porsche, he actually designed a decent amount of tanks. He didn't do a good job at it, though. Every single one of them that he designed just sucked. Like, they were terrible.
Who, Porsche?
Yeah, Ferdinand Porsche designed tanks for the Nazis in World War II.
Now, I did know that. And I'll say this. Ferdinand Porsche had a very rough start to his design career, like designing vehicles. Even the Porsche vehicles, the first few were a little bit out there. But, I hate to say it, but it's kind of like later on when Ferdinand kind of like took a back seat when the design actually started getting a little bit better. But he definitely like was the kickstart to the whole thing. Like, you got to give him his credit, though.
Yeah, it's just weird. I mean, like, and also his, like, I got to tell y'all, if y'all ever look into anything, like Old Warrior just said it, the Ferdinand, which is a tank actually named after Ferdinand Porsche, he designed the thing entirely. It sucked. It didn't even have a coaxial machine gun, which is like a bare necessity on a tank. So then they ended up designing this weird gun that had a curved barrel, so that way they could stick it out like a Looney Tunes cartoon and spray people off the top of the tank if they needed to. It didn't work. Also, like, just to get off of the Germans in World War II and just give y'all a really quick little rabbit hole fun fact about the United States. This is probably one of the cooler ones I can think of right now. In World War II, because the Japanese pretty much took control of all parts of Southeast Asia that produced most of the world's rubber at the time, the United States had to figure out how to make synthetic rubber, and in the process, we ended up inventing silly putty.
I think I've heard that from somewhere, but it just rang a bell.
Yeah, so that's actually really cool. Like, silly putty is a direct product of World War II, and also we finally ended up making synthetic rubber, which is now commonplace around the world. You rarely ever see a real rubber tire. You end up seeing a lot of synthetic rubber tires. And also, yes, Walter, you are correct. Walter threw in a fun fact. He was like, "Tell the enforcer," and that's true. The 88 millimeter gun that was so famous on German tanks originally started out the war as an anti-aircraft gun, and then they figured out in North Africa, under the command of Erwin Rommel during that time, that the 88 millimeter flat gun also doubled down incredibly well for being an anti-tank gun. And so then they're like, hey, wouldn't it be cool, I don't know, if we put this on a tank? And then they put it on some tanks, which was the Tiger one, and then they were like, wow, that's actually pretty damn good. It almost punches through everything. All of the tanks they put those things on just sucked, like, every single way. Try using the transmission. I will tell you, you're not making it far. But anyways, we have rabbit holed so hard, we have to get on to the next one. But I hope y'all enjoyed the little just World War II fun facts, because I don't know what got us into that so much. I think I was talking about International Legion members and giving some facts about, International Legions through history. But I hope y'all enjoyed it. Anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, so we're going to claw our way out of that rabbit hole and move on to our second poll, which says Ukraine says it assassinated a former Ukrainian presidential candidate, Ilya Kiva, near Moscow today. And what are your thoughts? 45% said it was deserved and necessary. That is the most popular choice. 26% said unsure. 20% said that's not good for Western relations. And 9% said, that was really unnecessary. And I got to tell you, on this one, I understand why they'd want to do it, because the guy was pro-Russian, he was in Moscow, and he was a former Ukrainian politician. Now, one thing I will say for a fact that we all can sort of appreciate is that assassinating people in the midst of trying to get Western support is not a good idea, because that's going to turn the West off a little bit, and now that support is sort of teetering on a precipice right now, Ukraine needs to do everything it can to reassure the West that it is going to be above board on all of their dealings. And right now on that one, that was not a smart move. Nobody's perfect. Ukraine, I think, made a blunder on this one. I don't think it's going to cripple them or permanently hurt them, but they ought to think twice before doing that kind of stuff again. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, on the surface, it sounds like it's it sounds like it's not great to do that. But I did look into this guy's information, and it's not as straightforward as saying, this guy looks like he was threatening Zelensky's power or anything like that if people are making that argument. I looked into him, and it turns out that he was the leader of the Communist Party inside of Ukraine, and then 1 month before the war began, well, the invasion in 2022, he moved to Russia, and then immediately, as soon as he got there, he requested for a passport from Putin directly, which meant that he was revoking his citizenship from Ukraine and was requesting Russian citizenship, which he was actually granted. So the guy went from being a Ukrainian politician of the Ukrainian Communist Party to then traveling into Russia and immediately becoming a Russian citizen. And since then, he has been a massive advocate of everything the Russians have been doing inside of Ukraine, even the war crimes as well. So while it looks like it's not necessarily a good thing on the surface, when you look into the guy was very similar to what the French would have called during World War II a collaborator, and during World War II, whenever the Free French could, they would end up killing the Vichy France collaborators just as a, an act to do. But I would say looking into that, I feel like it was honestly justified because the guy wasn't even really, like, he may have been a former Ukrainian politician, but what we're talking about right now would be like, say, I don't know, the U.S. Speaker of the House running away to China and then becoming a member of the Chinese Communist Party and revoking their American citizenship. If a war broke out and they got assassinated, I wouldn't be shedding any tears for them in that kind of a situation. And putting myself into Ukraine's shoes in that situation, I think their move in this instance was actually justified. And
also, I saw in the live chat, Alexander Nev said, he said, oh, like the West has never assassinated anyone, LOL. And you have a point. The West does assassinate people as well. I will say that is true. But like Surf Sykes said in the live chat as well, they should have denied responsibility. Ukraine came out and said, we did it. And they took responsibility for it and made it very clear they did it. And they wanted it to be known that they did it. That was not smart because while the West assassinates people, and that's wrong because you don't have due process right there. I don't care what anyone says. You're supposed to have due process in America. That's democratic. That's the way it's supposed to be. If you're going to assassinate someone, if the country has to do it, you want to deny responsibility so that way it doesn't have a horrible appearance in your country when you claim to be a democracy that you're going out and killing people that are saying things that you don't like. Because the Russian guy, or the pro-Russian Ukrainian politician in Moscow, he wasn't actually planning anything against Ukraine to my knowledge, was he?
I don't think he was, but I have to be honest, like there's no due process here or anything, but I kind of, get where they came from doing this because it's kind of common to do in the middle of a war, especially when someone clearly went and betrayed the nation and they were a political figure, is to have them assassinated, even if there is no due process involved.
Maybe it just seems like that's not really democratic. It sounds like that's more of like a gang type activity. Like once someone tries to leave the gang, they just get killed. That doesn't seem, totally above board. But countries make mistakes, and that might have been one of them.
Well, I would have to say not so, because Britain is largely a democracy. People call it a constitutional monarchy, but in practice, it largely operates like a democracy, a parliamentary one. And in World War II, when they finally chased down Lord Haw Haw, and I know nobody knows who that is, Google it if you don't, because it's a really interesting story. But Lord Haw Haw was a British trader who ended up joining the Nazi Germans in World War II, and he would get onto the radio, and he would try and turn Britons against the British during World War II and make them side with the Germans. The British finally found him after Germany had been defeated in 1945, and the soldiers that found him were told to shoot the guy on sight, and they did. That was just how it worked. It was kind of similar for the Americans who joined the George Washington Legion as well, but I think in some way, they ended up actually being arrested and then put into prison here in the United States. But nevertheless, usually it's just precedent to take these people out, including that, the Free French in World War II, probably the best example I could use. They would use their partisans inside of, Vichy France to try and execute any French collaborators that were working with the Nazi Germans whenever it was possible. And so while there is no due process, there is a decent historical precedent there to say that this isn't really out of line in most instances historically.
If I would see that argument if the guy had information that could potentially severely harm Ukrainian citizens or innocent civilians or even the military. I could see that argument 100%. No due process in that scenario, just go take him out because he's a threat to their national security. But if the guy simply was a politician and he didn't have access to sensitive information, then he wasn't an active threat. He was just simply someone who had betrayed the country and ran off. And, Ukraine could revoke his citizenship. They could do several things. They could simply press charges against him if they ever capture him, put him on trial. But to go kill the guy in a foreign country, that's getting pretty out there. That's almost what Russia does.
Well, I mean, I'd have to disagree with that, though, because the Russians don't execute people that, a lot of the people they don't execute in this instance aren't people who leave their country and then revoke their citizenship and pretty much become a traitor, especially in a war. They just end up executing journalists who point out corruption in, say, like the Russian school system, and then they get 2 bullets to the back of the head and they get thrown in a child's playground in the middle of the city they lived in. That's a little bit different to me than what they did, because we know, and I mean, if we're talking truthfully, we know that the U.S. goes around and has plenty of people assassinated around the world. We are always hearing about people who die in mysterious circumstances here, there, and yonder, and it usually, not all the time, but usually has some merit to it. And I feel like it would be a little unfair to say that Ukraine can't do that, but we know that the United States does and will continue to do that throughout multiple scenarios and instances, even when we're not at war.
But the U.S. is smart enough to conceal it. You got to admit, that's probably the wiser thing to do. If you're going to go assassinate someone for maybe not the appropriate reasons, I'm not condoning it, but you'd want to probably try to say you didn't do it, or at least deny it.
Oh, I can agree with that. I could certainly agree with that. Never good to try and admit that you assassinated someone, even if it is justified or historically a precedent. It's never good to, come out and say, yeah, we did it. And I don't really get why they're doing that as well, because they never admitted officially to the helicopter raid on Belgrade. Y'all remember that way back at the beginning of the war in like May of 2022. They never admitted that. They still deny it to this day officially, but we all know they did it. And United 24 even says they did it. But it doesn't really make sense to come out and admit you did it. I mean, just be happy that the guy's assassinated, and the SBU was able to pull it off. But with that, I hope we addressed that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are fresh out of poll questions, so we are moving on to our super chat questions. And first up, we have a very generous $100 donation from Mark C. Pessim Parabellum.
Hey!
And I probably butchered that once again, but Mark, thank you very much for that support, and of course, keeping the channel running. And Mark says, okay, this is the one he warned me about. It's literally full of Latin words. So he says, exercitus, lispring saxa magna tempora, Vincent et semper. Let's see. Hoc advuvat ad parendam andrium et mat ad legem.
Dang. I don't know.
Let me put that into Google Translate before we all have a stroke. Let's see. Google Translate. Okay, we're going to figure this out. So he's detected Polish. That's not Polish. But that sounded like Latin, didn't it?
that was certainly Latin, man. That is not Polish.
Okay, so he said the Lee Spring Army wins big time and always, and this helps to prepare Andrew and Matt for law.
Hey, dude, that is actually pretty good message, right? They're pretty cool too that you put that in Latin. Now I gotta ask, Mark, did you put that in Google Translate, or do you know Latin? Because if you know Latin, that is so cool. I've always wanted to know Latin, never had the time to learn it, but I think it's pretty neat. And I gotta thank you so much for the support, and I gotta thank you for the kind words as well, Mark, because folks like you who support this channel and speak in Latin help us to make this thing possible. And remember, everyone, you have to speak in Latin. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well, and thank you for throwing in the kind words in a dead language. Really neat. And I gotta say, massive respect. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and you know what's up. We're on to the next one, but thank you so much for being a legend of the Lee Spring Army.
Indeed. And also, unfortunately, that guy that I banned, he was running his mouth like a wild, nut, so that's why I banned him. So he got banned a second time as he came back doing it again. But anyways, up next, we have our second super chat of the night, which is from Mark CC's Parabellum once again. And also, Mark said in the live chat, ouch, my ears. I don't blame you, because that was a butchery. But anyways, Mark puts in a second $100 donation, and thank you very much, Mark, for that support once again. He says, let's see here. I'm not sure what the first part means. That's very interesting. Unfortunately, you're seeing that.
Yeah, I don't know.
So the part after that.
Sharpie that part out.
After the winky face, it says, okay, small point. India has had a great relationship with Russia, so there's a multi-generational support for them, although non-aligned Russia always supported India, and this is why the widespread public support, and that's it.
Oh, well, it looks like it may. Well, actually, I think this is why the white. Oh, I think that was just like ending the statement quickly because it was probably reaching like the character limit. But I gotta thank you for the support, Mark, and you were correct. Usually, Indians have had a better relation with the Soviets, the Russians, than they did with the West, and that's why when you look at the Indian military, they look pretty Soviet in style. They have a decent amount of Soviet equipment in their forces. They use Mi-8s. They use a version of the T-90 as their main battle tank. They have a lot going towards the Russian or Soviet direction, and it's for an interesting reason that back. It's time for another rabbit hole, everyone. I am so sorry, but there is a lot of history that nobody tells anyone, and you have to like lay that out there before you get to why it's like this in the modern day. Back in the 1960s and 50s, when India was having a bit of an issue because there were Muslims and Hindus in India, it was all part of the British Raj, and when the British let it go, India actually included Pakistan. In Pakistan is majority Islamic. India is majority Hindu, and there's a huge cultural clash that happened. They hated each other, and so Pakistan split off from India and became a separate country. During this time in history, both the Soviet Union and the United States, of course, saw an opportunity in this area to support one or the other. The Soviet Union ended up picking India, funnily enough, and the United States ended up picking Pakistan, which that relationship still kind of exists even in the modern day, although it's started to deteriorate greatly since the collapse of the Soviet Union. But the United States would end up supporting the Pakistanis massively through the Cold War. We would give them tons of money, tons of weapons and equipment, and they actually were the people who supplied the Mujahideen with the stingers that they would use in the Soviet-Afghan war against the Soviet Union. India, on the other hand, started to grow closer relations to the Soviets and started to get a lot of military equipment from them, a lot of training, and a lot of supplies as well. Funnily enough, though, there was a little bit of a thing that happened, and this was bizarre. The Indians didn't want to be communists, but they did end up aligning with the Soviets. But the Pakistanis went a little rogue and started to use some of the weapons and money that we were giving them to fund a terrorist group in India that's called the Bengal Tigers, and they still exist to this day. None of y'all have probably ever heard of these people, but what's crazy is that throughout all of modern history, they have been the largest terrorist group by numbers worldwide.
The Bengal Tigers, and to think I've never hardly heard of them.
You have never heard of them. Ever. Nobody has. But I think there's something like several 100,000 active members of the Bengal Tigers that are known of in eastern India, and they usually exist in the area of Odisha, Jharkhand, and also down towards, I think it's all the way down towards Tamil Nadu, down near Bengaluru. Like, they pretty much control the entire east coast of India, and there are always terrorist attacks that are happening in this part of the country. Sometimes they expand all the way out to New Delhi itself, and terrorist attacks are conducted by the Bengal Tigers there. But that group is actually funded, and still to this day, by the Pakistani government. And it's a very interesting hangover from the Cold War. But moving on from that, that's true. Historically, the Indians are more so leaning towards the Soviet Union or Russia, and that may be why we see the Indians even walking that tightrope today. But the world is always changing, and it's really changing now. The United States is really vying to get a friendship diplomatically with India because it's a mutual interest. The Indians don't like the Chinese don't like the Indians. In reality, they're fighting in the Himalayas over who controls what part of where, and the Indians are also not wanting to become a part of the Chinese Belt and Road program because of that. And the U.S. wants India to become a part of a U.S. alliance, or at least a U.S. sphere, along with Sri Lanka, because that means that we will have an active ability to disrupt the Chinese ability to have complete dominance over the Indian Ocean area economically, including parts of East Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia as well. So going through all of that, you are absolutely correct, Mark. Historically, that is the precedent, but times are starting to change, and we're starting to see that the winds of change are bringing India more so into the U.S. sphere than their former Russian sphere that they've been in for decades. But still, thank you so much for the support. I hope y'all enjoyed that little rabbit hole well, and thank you so much once again for providing incredible support, Mark, helping this channel to keep on rolling, and also allowing me to rabbit hole like we used to, like in the good old days. And so with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving back into the news.
All right, and also I see here that Mark said in the live chat, India has also realized that Russian equipment is crap, so they canceled major arms orders and bought French, and that's something else too. And also, Mark, I think a part of it, if I recall correctly, was Russia couldn't even fulfill the orders because they were so desperate for equipment in Ukraine. They literally were using some of the stuff they're supposed to send to India on the battlefield in Ukraine, and plus the Indians realized, like you're saying, I think that crap is crap, so we don't want it. But Enforcer, do you recall that the same way I do, or am I misremembering it?
I think you're remembering that correctly. And also, I have to make a quick correction, everyone. I'm sure y'all have never heard of the Bengal Tigers because it's actually the Tamil Tigers. So just a little quick correction there. Got the name a little wrong. So, you may have been pulling up a sports team instead of a terrorist group, but it's the Tamil Tigers, not the Bengal Tigers. So thank you, everyone, for correcting me on that. Because I saw everyone saying that in the live chat. I was like, I didn't mess up like that, did I? And then I looked and I was like, oh, I screwed up big time. But it is the Tamil Tigers. But with that, we are on to the last one of this segment. Now, calling a sports team a terrorist group. But on to the last one.
And the last one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, another channel legend who throws in a $20 donation. And thank you very much for that support. And he says, hope all is well with my two favorite brothers. And hey, let's go. Hey! He says, do you think Putler will fight the war until the Russian economy suffers a complete collapse? Or will Ukraine defeat them first?
And I thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment, first off. And to answer your question, do I think the complete collapse of the Russian economy will come? Yes, I think that's really the way this war is going to end. Usually in wars where both countries are in the mindset that there must be a total victory, like the Russians and the Ukrainians are in right now, the war will last until their economies collapse, one or the other. Usually it's the domestic situations in the home front that really come to a front that end the war. And I think that's what we're probably going to see in this instance with the Russians. So I have a feeling that we probably will see the Russian economy collapse before the Ukrainians actually beat them and push them out of the country. That's what I'm thinking at this point in the war. But also, we are doing well. We have one more exam to go. It's on Friday, and I'm praying that it will end well. Who knows if it will or won't? I have no idea. It could be.
It's going to be thick with two C's.
It's going to be thick with two C's, my boy. We're going to be looking at that thing and going, damn, I've never seen a dump truck that thick before. But still, I gotta say, I think it's going to be good. I'm doing good right now too, and also, by the way, y'all, I have been able to get a little bit of a discussion done today, and we have confirmed that we will be able to review full-on machine guns on our gun review videos. Like, I'm talking about full automatics. It will happen. So, hey, I'm pretty happy to say it. It's going to be pretty cool. And I don't, did I tell you about that, Matthew?
Yes, you did. And all these videos, these gun videos, are going to be produced by your boy Matt. He's going to be setting up the camera and doing a little editing, to my understanding.
And I'm telling y'all, like, the guns we've got lined up, just a few of them, are really cool. We're going to be able to shoot a full auto Tommy gun, a full auto FAL, like a full auto FAL, not a semi-automatic, a full auto FAL, an actual effing FAL. And we'll be able to shoot a full auto AK-74 and a 47. We also found one with a suppressor, so that's going to be really cool. Loads of them. Like, there's going to be so much cool stuff. Y'all aren't going to believe it. So I hope y'all enjoy those videos. We're also going to be trying to tie in the ones that we can to the war in Ukraine. Like, for example, the AKs most likely will be tied into Ukraine almost directly. We'll be talking about how they're used there and how they shoot and everything. But it's going to be really cool, and I can't wait. I'm super excited. And I'm just saying this, just letting y'all know, just fair warning, I have been able to find, and I got to say, Matthew, I'm hyped to say this one. I have been able to find, and let me, KBKGW, so there we go. Let me go pull up a picture of this thing. I have been able to find something that is actually a little rare. It is, well, it's rare at least here in America, but it's not rare in Poland. But I've been able to find the license-built version of a Polish AK. This right here is the 1962 KG WZ 1960. Now, that sounds like a fax machine, Matthew, but you know what's cool about it?
What is cool?
What's cool about it is that this little AK right here, and now let me see if I can get a better picture. This one right here with this little scope, this little thing on the front of the barrel, that 10-round magazine, and that rubber butt pad right there, This thing is the Polish version of a grenade launching AK.
That is pretty cool, man.
And you
I
know,
gotta say, I just like them for AKs, man. Like, I look at them and see them. Like, you see a whole bunch more than I do. I just look at them and think, cool. It looks like an AK.
and what's really cool about this, Matthew, is that the grenade this thing launches. I wish I could find a picture of it. I think it's like a. Let me see. What the hell is it called? It's a K. Let's see. KBKG grenade. Let me see if I can find that. Damn, dude. I gotta go back and do all the research again to find out what this thing can shoot. Dang it, wait, I gotta show a picture of this because it's so stupid. It looks like a cartoon little rocket. I can't find it. Oh, man, I feel like so rushed right now because I know this is starting to take some time, but let's see here. Oh, my lord, I can't find it. Okay, we'll come back and look for that later. Wait a minute. Nope, still can't find it. Okay, we'll come back and look for that later. But I've been able to find one of these, and I've also been able to find the inert dummy rounds that this thing fires. And what is so cool is that the grenade this thing fires can actually punch through 160 millimeters of rolled homogeneous steel, like the real ones can. So it's almost armor piercing. Well, actually, it is armor piercing. It can go through like armored personnel carriers and stuff like that.
Very cool, I gotta say. You know, it's gonna be a good day when you get to shoot this at the range, but you got to use your AK.
Oh yeah, that's it. You know it. But we've got a lot lined up for y'all, and I hope y'all get to enjoy every little bit of it because we're going to be trying to find cool and obscure stuff to review. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to I think the last. When we were on the last.
We're done.
We're done. Well, not done for the night. We're just beginning, but still. Thank you so much once again for support, LSA Sergeant Figment. I hope that does address that well. Hopefully it gives y'all a little bit of a behind the scenes as well here on what we're planning on doing over this little Christmas break. And I can't wait. I'm so excited to do it. And I bet we're all going to have a great time. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on back into the news in Ukraine and into the northern area of the front lines near Drovchina and Kupiansk, where we got to see that the 108th Brigade celebrated its 7-year anniversary, and apparently it was a little spicy, so we can't show it here. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see that near the area of Avdiivka, there was a little bit of a sighting of an STRV-122. Look at that thing. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's beautiful, so beautiful, very Swedish.
And Matthew, you know it's called a leopard, but let me introduce you to the snow leopard. Oh.
Mm.
Oh.
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 Got a little bit of that magic dust on it.
Man, fine Peruvian blow. But nice to see. And watch out, y'all. It's Ozzy Osbourne. He's running in with the straw. But anyways, very nice to see this STRV-122 in the area. And hopefully he'll be doing really well. Moving on from that into the area of Svatove, we also got to see that an FPV drone destroyed a brand new Russian SAM system. We've never even seen this thing get destroyed before. It's called a Vitius. I'll show you what it looks like. The Vitius SAM system is the Polish... well, actually, that's an AK as well. Let me show y'all the S350. It is brand spanking new by military terms. That's what it looks like in its natural form. It was introduced into service in 2019, and it's only been used officially in the Syrian civil war. But as of today, there was proof, because one got destroyed, that it's now being used in Ukraine. We don't even know how many of these things there are. The numbers are classified. But one of them did get smacked by a simple FPV drone, and they lost one of their newest, latest, and greatest surface-to-air missile systems. There it is right down there. And it's about to become a victim of one of the deadliest things in the Ukraine war, FPV drone. And there we can see the drone went in, and we now see the fire burning where that S350 was just a moment ago, confirming that it is the first of its kind to go up in flames. Let's see, I was trying to read that. That looks like it said the National Guard of Ukraine. So the FPV drone came from a National Guard unit of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Really cool to see, and great to know that they were able to claim the first kill of the S350 in the entire war. And I see someone saying, what happened to the stream? I don't know. I haven't gotten any emails saying that something's happened to the stream. Let me check, though. Let me check. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't
see anything wrong with it.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it. So I think we're good. So let us know if we're not. But I think we're good for now. But moving on from Svatove and past the Kremena Forest, we're now moving on down to Klishkivka and Bakhmut, where we got to see that some Ukrainian soldiers were on the move and walked past the remains of one of the M113s that unfortunately didn't make it out of the battlefield. See them wandering their way up, and we can see that this M113 appears to have been completely obliterated at some point, practically split in two. It's very wild to see that sometimes these vehicles just get hit so badly they blow to pieces, but still, out of all that, the engine block looks largely intact, which is just bizarre. It's like, damn, the whole thing, it had enough force to literally rip the APC in two, but somehow the engine block is still there. It's just fine. But that's the end of the clip, and showing the semi-brutality of what the lines are like out there right now. But moving on from that and into our next clip down near Orlivka, we got to see a Russian tank run into some very bad luck. It got hit by a main battle tank, it then retreated, and then got hit by an FPV and destroyed completely. So, with that, let me show you all this clip. It's funny. And when you see, it's the corner group. But here's the clip. I have to laugh at my own jokes, y'all, because if I don't, who will? But we can see that
It's the freak on the leash.
But we can see the little Russian tank. Well, actually, that's the Ukrainian tank moving up. It's a T-64BV. And they're just looking around, you know, firing on the move. A ballsy move, because usually, even though it has a stabilizer, that can affect accuracy a good bit. And we can see our Russian tank right there. It's firing, not seeing the Ukrainian one that's about a few hundred yards away. So we now see the Ukrainian tank has turned itself to face the Russian tank. And it looks like it's trying to roll forward to get a good line of sight. There's the Russian tank again. And let's see here. There it is. Actually, I can't tell if that's the Ukrainian one or the Russian one at this point. Yeah, that looks a lot like the Russian one. It's got a cope cage on it, so that is the Russian one. And let's see if we can get an idea of the variant. Looks like it might be a T-72B3, or I can't really tell. I can't tell what the back part of the turret looks like, which is a clear way to tell what's a T-72 and a T-80. But it's rolling out. It's rolling across a destroyed railroad berm, suggesting this may be near Avdiivka or Kurtamivka, one or the other. But we can now see it moving out of the area and deploying its smoke screen. And then we saw it get hit by the tank. And, ooh, that looks like a pretty direct hit. Let's see where it was. Right on the back of the turret. That most likely went clean through, maybe knocking out the breech of the tank and concussing the two crew members in the tank, the commander and the gunner, most likely knocking them unconscious or taking them out entirely. We can see that the turret is no longer moving, most likely suggesting that that assumption is true, and we can see that the tank is largely coming to a stop at this point, maybe suggesting that the driver is bailing out and abandoning the tank. We haven't seen the driver bail out yet. We haven't seen any of the crew bail out at the moment. But we can see it's still moving on. It looks like the driver hasn't bailed. He's decided to press forward in the tank, although the turret is stuck because the gunner is no longer functioning. We can see the tank still trying to roll on. The smoke screen is still deployed. And here comes the FPV drone right at the end. Oh, wait a minute, never mind. But with that, that's the end of the clip. Interesting to see a Russian tank getting double tapped. Moving on from that, and down into the area of Avdiivka, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the battlefield assessment. So, let's take a look. And over the past 24 hours, we have seen that the Russians have not moved an inch. I was having to make sure of that, doubly sure, because I saw someone in the live chat say, Avdiivka has fallen. And I think that's a little premature, because they're still holding on to the entire city, and also the flanks pretty well. So, don't think it's fallen. I think that's a little bit of a stretch to say right now. But one thing we did see in the area of Avdiivka today is that the 47th Magura was using their Bradleys to fire on the Russians, and a lot like the horsey symbol of their unit, it was shredding them. Help! But anyways, we can see the drone looking down, and ooh, we see that Bradley laying down that sweet southern heat like that sweet baby rays that Mark Zuckerberg likes to put on everything.
He may drink water strange, but he knows how to pick a good barbecue sauce, I'm telling you.
He be picking the bussin' kind, you know what I mean?
Yes, he does.
I'm just out here about to put the Sweet Baby Rays. I'm surprised that when they took that picture of him surfing, he wasn't covered in Sweet Baby Rays. Instead, he was covered in sunscreen.
He must maybe own some Sweet Baby Rays, like maybe some piece of the company or something, perhaps, because he was promoting it so hard. It was kind of weird.
It was. I was like, this was coming off a little weird, you know. But then again, he just comes off weird. So, you know, what are we getting?
Yeah, yeah, facts. Let's boil it right down to common sense. There you go.
And we can see the Bradley just hitting everything. Sparks flying up from some of the impacts.
Техас, друже, такий ракурс і тримай, щоб ми бачили...
I swore that was you talking for a second. I was like, what the hell are you speaking? Ukrainian doesn't...
Куди він стріляє, що хоче? Плюс.
We see
Angry Penguin said they're trying to come off as a common man. Talked about Mark Zuckerberg. He succeeded at creating Facebook. I don't know if he succeeded at that. I think he failed.
I think we can all kind of agree, you know, whether you like billionaires or don't like them, they all generally are kind of weird, you know.
Yeah, a little out of touch, maybe just a good bit.
You know, you got the Bezos laugh. Whoa! You got, you know, Musk, a little eccentric. I got to say though, you know, you got to respect each of them though, because, you know, whether you think they're evil people or anything, they have done pretty good in business. You know, you can't disagree. Otherwise, why in the world are they billionaires if they sucked at business? And then, you know, Zuckerberg, you know, he's just weird, you know, kind of. But, you know, they're weird. You know, I don't think anyone can disagree with that. You know, I think that's a pretty blanket statement that everyone can, you know, just look back and go, yeah, that's right. That's kind of true. But anyways, we can see the Bradley continuing to lay down fire. This is also Stepove, by the way. They're firing into the village of Stepove.
Also, in the meantime, if y'all can't see the poll question, I've seen some people saying that it's still not working. It says, if Putin were to take Ukraine, do you think he would stop there or take over more countries? That is the poll question.
And make sure to answer it. Make sure to answer it in the live chat if you want. Just give a written free-form response. I mean,
Schlawa.
Man, he got that schlaw out here again. But actually, Matthew, this says war in reverse. It's a W-A and an R, but it looks like slaw to me, and that's what we're calling it. It is slaw. But anyways, moving on from that, a little bit of news. It's great to see the Bradleys being used by the Magura. We're moving on into our next clip where we also saw more combat footage coming from the Magura in this area of the line.
I love the sounds.
Damn, that subtitle, that's a pretty interesting start to a sentence right there. That's usually bad news for, you know, folks at home when you hear that on TV at night that someone escaped prison and then they say that right afterwards. You go, uh-oh. And it's like, lock the doors. We see that my boy here's got the Canadian C7. And we can see the Russians on the drone footage. And we see the Russians firing. Some bullets whizzing over. Alright, well, we have to mute it now, sadly, because the epic inspirational music is now here, and that could get us copyrighted. But we can see that the Russians are firing wildly, almost up into the air. Some of the bullets are getting close to hitting the Ukrainian trench, though. We now see the Russians getting hammered with a mortar shell. Rick said, we don't need a 20-minute dissertation about the Waffen-SS. Well, guess what, pal? It's happening, and you're going to like it.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it, man. We love that input.
I thank you so much.
Rick is the new chief of operations here in Force HQ.
You know what, Rick? I'm going to let you put in the 4 hours every day that I put in before the show starts to even make it happen. How about that? We'll let you do it. I would be fine with that. I would be perfectly fine. And then you can have the right to complain. But with that, that's the end of that clip right there. Very nice to see the Magura once again fighting the Russians up close and making sure to hold their ground. This is ensuring that the flanks do not collapse. But moving on from that and into the area of Avdiivka, we also got to see Russian forces getting hit hard down here as well. And also, Angry Penguin said that scope looks a lot like an ACOG. Kind of. I don't know a lot about that Canadian scope, though. I don't know if it's like an ACOG and it has, like, the little, radium illuminator in it. Isn't it radium? No, it's not radium, Matthew. It's something else. Tritium? It's not tritium.
Yep.
Oh, it is?
It is tritium, I believe. Now, I'm saying that pretty confidently, but actually, is tritium in an ACOG? Yes, it is tritium and fiber optics.
Man, you know, when tritium usually leaks out of a nuclear reactor, it's a big deal. When tritium's in my scope, it's actually pretty nice. It's like, wow, look, it's tritium. But anyways, pretty interesting. You know, I don't know if they have like a tritium illuminator or anything for their optic. I can tell you though that in an ACOG, that is amazing. Like, it really does just like spoil you for like visibility with your scope. It's the best, and I highly recommend you all. If y'all can ever get an ACOG, get it. Like, if you could get your child a Christmas present, or you could get yourself an ACOG. I'm not saying be a bad parent or anything, but the ACOG is pretty nice. You know, I'm just putting that out there. But anyways, we can see these Russian...
Also, by the way, did you know the tritium in an ACOG only lasts for 12 years?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it gets dimmer after 12 years, or it starts going out.
Can you get it replaced?
Here's a question right here about that. Let's see. The answer is yes, but they will charge you.
How much? like that's a good question.
They didn't say. That's the key.
Oh no. But anyway, you can see the Russians moving on down this road. The Russians are actually filming this column advancing in the southern end of Avdiivka. Disaster's about to strike, though. You're about to watch these vehicles get vaporized right before their eyes. And they just keep coming. It's actually an incredibly large column moving into the area.
And also, good night to you, Mark. We'll see you tomorrow, most likely.
And good night, Mark. And thank you for helping us to keep the channel running, too.
Danke.
Dankeschön, dankeschön. And take care. Man, these Russians are running. They're going. Look at them go. When you see the Russians out there moving through the fields, well, this has got to be really south of Avdiivka. And there they go out there into the distance. And the Russians are filming them like, look at the proud tankista, and then it gets blown up immediately. Oh, man. And we can see the column still moving on, because in an instance like this, usually you're told never to stop, just keep going. But that's not going to help them. It's not going to help them at all. Because guess what? They stopped. And there goes the second one. Right after they stopped, the second one gets hit. And that's the end of the clip. 2 vehicles hit in 1 clip. I can live with it. And it's of course showing that Russian forces in this area are starting to be attrited of armor, and that's where the casualties are coming from in the casualty report. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see that the Ukrainians destroyed a delivery drone. From what we're understanding, the Russians are whipping these things out, and they're practically brand new. There's some kind of a remote-controlled or automated delivery system meant to bring equipment to Russian forces on the front lines and make it less involved. The Ukrainians are targeting these things and destroying them, and this is the first time we've seen one of them get destroyed on film. There it goes. It's just like a tracked, like, delivery system. And we see the Russians trying to get the supplies out of it quickly. Looks like bags of, like, milk. I don't know what that is.
Bags of milk. Whoa, is that cart moving by itself?
Yeah, it's a automated cart.
Huh, that's pretty high tech for them.
Yeah, I don't really know what's up with that. It's like, is this like, oh, well, that FPV drone just flat out missed. Like, there's no kidding around about that. That one just was a straight up miss. But there it goes again.
That is one janky looking thing, but it's automated, so I guess it's pretty high tech.
For the Russians, this is like, you know, this is space age. For the Ukrainians, this is kind of normal at this point. You know, not for a delivery system, but just, you know, an automated or remote control system. Pretty normal for them. But we can see it coming back again after another supply run.
I guarantee you a Russian's going to get absolutely flattened by a thing at some point because they're going to run these Russians over like the poor bastards they are.
Oh, wait, I think it actually got taken out that time. Nope, it's still running.
Oh, damn, that thing's indestructible.
Third time's the charm. They're going to hit it a third time. Yep, here it comes. This one's got to be the one that takes it out. We see them filming the stupid thing as it's driving by. They're like, look at the car. And here comes the third FPV drone. But that's the end of the clip. Apparently, it just survived the entire ordeal, but they're trying to take him out. But moving on.
Leave it to the most, backwoods piece of crap that the Russians have ever made to be the most survivable thing of the war.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it was survivable just because the Ukrainians missed it twice. So, yeah, I think if it got hit, it would have been taken out. But still, pretty weird to see and pretty high-tech for the Russians. You know, high-tech for them is, you know, normal for everyone else or below par. But still, it's innovation for them, and we rarely ever see that. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also get to see a Russian tank getting hit by an ATGM. And as the title says, it causes the crew to flee. They got hit by the missile that forces them to flee. And when you see it getting hit, it appears that the turret's now on fire. And we now see the 3 crew members bailing out and fleeing as the next tank continues to advance. Probably going to run them over later. The clip ends, but showing another destroyed Russian tank in the Avdiivka front. We're now going to be moving on from the Avdiivka battlefield, where of course the losses are significantly high, and the Russians are gaining no ground, and we're about to be moving on down towards Marinka, where we got to see the 28th Brigade's repair shop in action. And they're doing work and putting in the hours and taking what's ours. We can see them working on some BMP2 track links. We can also see them revving one up, you know, just getting it out there, seeing how it's doing. We can also see them putting on more track links. It looks like they just have nothing to do but track links. We can also see a damaged road wheel of a BMP. We can see them working on something. I can't tell what they're doing right there. We can also see one of them smoking a cig, because nothing better like a smoke break and a little bit of cancer. We can also see what appears to be a pint of Guinness sitting here on this table. Looks like a workshop for the boys. Massive respect. And I bet you they're getting these BMPs out in no time. Enjoy the Guinness. Moving on from that, we're now going to be moving on down towards where the 72nd Brigade was able to destroy a TOS today. And of course, produce one of those amazing shockwaves that only a TOS loaded with thermobaric rockets can produce. Well, you see that TOS right down there? Poof! Ooh! Dude, those TOS systems, when they get hit, it's like a box of kindling going up.
It really is. It's a big boom.
It's a big, bada boom, a chugga chugga.
Igor!
Igor! And we can see it toasting. That thing's done for. Man, I've seen some things in my life, and that thing is done for. Well, that's the end of the clip right there. Wicked to see. And as JSM said, wedgie. Moving on from that, and down towards the area of Novoselivka, we also got to see the Ukrainians striking a Russian chopper. We can see that it's sitting in the field, idling. That's a grave mistake. Here it comes. Blink. And it's done for. Old Warrior said, when people are shooting at you, cancer is not your top priority. Nah, I'd agree. I'd agree. But still, you know, I always think about things like that. You know, I'm like, man, it's a cancer stick. Because it's been ingrained in my mind not to smoke. But moving on from that, we're now moving on to Wheelapole, where we also got to see some challengers that were in the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. In the snow. It looks kind of nice out there in the snow like that. Looks like it's part of a Christmas. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. But still, really neat, really cool. Challenger 2. What can I say? It's nice. Moving on from that little picture and on into our next bits of news, we also got to see that one of the Husky MRAPs that the British provided got stuck in the mud, and he ended up getting pulled out by a Turkish Kirby as the music plays. And look at the Kirby putting in the horsepower and pulling out this Husky. I got to say, those Huskies are kind of cool.
It is. Also, by the way, folks, the poll question has been posted twice in the live chat, so if you can't see it on the poll itself, it should be right there in the chat.
We are so sorry, everyone, that y'all can't see poll prompts sometimes. YouTube is screwy, and we have no better way to explain it. So I'm sorry about that, y'all. I hope everyone can bear with it, because we also have to bear with a lot that YouTube has been screwing over on the backside of things here, you know, behind the scenes with the channel. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Bradley having to tow a supply truck through the mud down here as well. And it appears that while most other parts of Ukraine have frozen over and the ground's become solid, down here in the southern front, it's actually gotten even worse. And it looks like the Rasputitsa might not end this year. It might just be going from bad to worse, and then from bad to somewhat okay. But when you see the Bradley towing the supply truck through the mud, of course at a somewhat slow speed, it's very hard even for the Bradley to get traction in this kind of mud. And also, Rider's Eye, you are correct. They are not using the right kind of tires on most of these vehicles for the weather, but the problem with that probably is to outfit all of the supply trucks and vehicles the Ukrainians are using with the right kind of tires, it would probably be cost prohibitive, and that may be why we're not seeing this. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit outside of the southern front and down in Kherson, because we got to see the return of a legend. Y'all know who it is. Madjar, bled. Madjar!
Birdies.
Shoigu! Это но не припасне! Чага-чага! Igor! And here we go.
Всіх цукерок, тут і БМДха. Хробача.
This is like Madjar's therapy or something, I guarantee you.
Yeah, I would bet money.
Коротенька дорозвідка, наш пасажир. Трансляція погана, але результат добрий. Падабум!
Badabum.
Давай ще одного туди. Щоб на вірочку мусить згоріти до ранку. Летить другий цукерок. Джага-джага!
Yeah.
Зараз подивимося, чи йому доста. Та й працюємо далі. Повертається нічний доктор допрацювати, а тут, виявляється, все в порядку. БМДха хробача вже така, як нам треба. Горить, паскуда. Горить надійно. Більше уваги не потребує. О, в другому спектрі.
And that BMD is like some PCP. It's burning and it's toxic.
Показує на те, що тут все в порядку. О. Палає, час від часу детонує. На ранок хрустика ви вже бачили, ще раз покажу. О, гепнуло ще раз. Добре, гарний початок передсвяткового вечора. Давай, давай, давай. Супер. От так то в нічному. От так. У звичайному. Ще давай. Добрі. Good.
It's cooking. It's charring. It's broiled.
Раночок виглядає абсолютно до нас прийнятно. Більше та холера біди робити не буде.
And with that, that's the end of the clip. But toasty, toasty. We also got to see a BTR-82 get the same treatment. Y'all want to see it? Let's check it out.
Паркування. Наступна хрень. Хробачий БТР. Зовсім поряд розвіддані підкинув дружній підрозділ, що її налітав. та й відразу опрацьовуємо. Полетів перший цукерок. Добре пішов. Ай, яке гарне влучання.
Hey, look at that, man. Bada boom, bada bang.
Наступний.
Bada-boom.
Другий теж дуже влучний.
Man, this guy, he's just going for it.
Man, Madhyar is like he's crazy, but it's the good type of crazy.
Man, he's a solid kind of crazy, man. Look at him. Mad respect.
З тим хробачим бетером закінчено. Звісно, ранкового покажу. Що там так пекає? Польк, польк, польк. На ранок хробачий бетер виглядає трохи похмуро і покоцано. Свят дай Боже, фільмую його на великому.
And I gotta tell you, that thing looks like a nice piece of coal. And that's what the Russians are getting for Christmas this year, because they're on the naughty list.
Якщо не розірвало, не здетонувало, то хробаки...
Hell, the Russians probably like some coal at this point.
You can keep his alarm,
They'll be telling, what, does Santa put the coal under the tree?
Who else would put the coal under the tree? Actually, it gets put in
That's kind of odd. Oh, yeah, whoever's putting the coal under the tree, the Russians would be begging the devil, whoever's putting it under there for some more, because they're cold. They need some heat.
Wait, you think the devil crawls out of the pits of hell every year to put coal under people's trees? What kind of Christmas
Hell, if I
have
know.
you
I
been
thought
having?
Santa was supposed to be all jolly and stuff. I didn't know he actually delivered the coal. I thought he said you got some coal, but he didn't say, like, you know, I'm delivering it.
Nah, man, he's rolling coal on you. Like my man doesn't
Santa's a
care.
redneck.
Dude, like, he's going to get out that lifted F-150, and he's going to absolutely roll coal on you if you're bad this Christmas. But moving on from that, it's time for us to hop into a small bit of news happening on the, not on the other side of the world, it's just a few hundred miles south. Down here with the homesteaders in hummus. We all know about hummus, and we got to see today that hummus was getting a little spicy again as the partygoers pulled out a bulldozer. We see the bulldozer moving down the street. As you all know, it's called a doobie. And when you see the little spice go off right there, but the doobie don't care. The doobie's keeping going. That's seeing that clip, but, you know, showing a little bit of what's going on over there in that part of the place where hummus is hanging out. Moving on from that, we also got to see a few clips from the area where hummus is the most, where the most hummus is. We got to see that today the homesteaders were trying to take care and remove the hummus from the area. Here's the clip. Dude, they gassing it. When you see him on the move. Popping off. You see some tanks rolling out. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but showing a little bit of what's going on up there. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip, where we also got to see some more homesteaders in action a little bit further south. Apparently, this is a part of a little thing that's happening further south on the Hummus Tin, near the area of Han Yunis.
I like the muzzle discipline they've got. Like they all have it pointed toward the ceiling when they're behind someone.
I have to agree as well, Andy. I have to agree.
Also, Enforcer, while this video is playing, got a question from Rob Eisman, who says, "Are the hummus tunnels getting flooded today?" And he says all over YouTube, but he wants to know from us.
Yes, they are being flooded. We actually covered that yesterday because we usually get to the news pretty quick. And I'll show you that in a second, since you asked about it. I'll make sure to show you the clip. Let's see here. Let me go to yesterday, and it would be right here, actually. There's the clip. We had it yesterday. It was the second bit of news we covered in this segment, and I'll show you all the video again right here, just to make sure that we can back up the fact that this is something that was happening as far as about 26, 28 hours ago. And here it comes. And now the water's rushing in.
Dang, I remember seeing this yesterday.
Well, you know, I mean, there's a lot of clips, but this is one of the big ones we showed yesterday.
That's a doozy.
Yeah, that's a doozy right there. But yes, they are getting, they are flooding the tunnels. So that is something we can confirm. And I hope that does address that well, because while many people get around to things like today, we get to it the day before. So if y'all like that, you know, hit the like button, help us to keep the channel running, you know, all that stuff. But we also heard that there was an offensive operation going on in the very southern part of the hummus tent near this area that is moving to try and wipe out any of the spice that may be down here as well. But with that, I hope that does... Oh, by the way, we have one more thing. We also got to see the Arrow in operation near Eliot today, which was a really interesting little clip. And that's the end of that clip right there. Really nice to see, though. But we're now going to be moving on from that and on out of the area, because it's time for us to return back to Ukraine and to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 651 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the peach. And let me make sure...
some speech, please. Please, some speech.
Here we go. The peach.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Сьогодні довгий і дуже змістовний день. День Збройних сил України. Я вітаю вас, воїни. Дякую за вашу міць, за вашу хоробрість, кожному і кожній, хто захищає Україну, наші державні інтереси, інтереси нашого суспільства. Ми всі в Україні вдячні. Відзначив державними нагородами наших воїнів. Напередодні підписав кілька указів до Дня Збройних сил. Загалом понад 700 воїнів відзначені. Усі достойні. Відвідав військовий шпиталь, подякував лікарям, підтримав хлопців, які відновлюються після поранень. І я дякую та пишаюся усіма воєнними лікарями України, усіма нашими бойовими медиками, усіма медичними сестричками і медичними братами, які рятують життя поранених воїнів, які повертають до життя після важких ударів окупанта. Відвідав сьогодні Охмадит на Миколая. І це символічно, що за оновленим календарем два свята тепер співпадають. День наших Збройних сил, основи оборони та День Святого Миколая. Саме життя говорить про те, що мрії наших дітей, безпека українських родин, культура українського народу – це те, що можливо лише на фундаменті могутніх і шанованих Збройних сил України. Їхніх результатів разом з усіма силами оборони та безпеки нашої держави. Важливо, що сила наших воїнів дійсно повертає безпеку нашим людям, нашим дітям, українським містам. Сьогодні Перша леді України разом з командою відвідала 2 особливі школи у Житомирській області – школи супергероїв. Загалом таких шкіл працює вже 11. Це державні установи під патронатом Олени, які створені саме при дитячих лікарнях. Іноді дітям треба лікуватись в стаціонарі протягом місяців, проходити довгу реабілітацію. І щоб не втрачати в освіті, в лікарнях працюють такі школи, такі особливі вчителі, що дають змогу дітям одночасно і лікуватись, і здобувати освіту. Важливо, щоб ця ініціатива зростала, щоб додавались нові освітні інституції в регіонах. Я вдячний усім, хто допомагає з роботою шкіл супергероїв і хто у такі дні, як сьогодні, допомагає створювати для усіх дітей України, де б вони не були, справжнє свято. Сьогодні також у нас були багато міжнародної роботи. Вдалося повернути в Україну ще 8 українських дітей, які були депортовані в Росію з нашої тимчасово окупованої території. Я дякую державі Катар за дієве посередництво та Дмитру Лубінцю, омбудсмену та всій команді, яка веде цю тему. Активно працюємо у Вашингтоні. Наша українська делегація, голова Верховної Ради Руслан Стефанчук, керівник Офісу Андрій Єрмак, міністр оборони Ростем Умєров. Важливі зустрічі, зокрема в Конгресі Сполучених Штатів, з представниками адміністрації президента Байдена, міністр оборони Остін, держсекретар Блінкен. Робота максимально енергійна. І як результат ми маємо хороші, потрібні сигнали для України, а також і новий пакет американської допомоги, військової підтримки. Я дякую за підтримку Сполученим Штатам. Взяв участь в засіданні лідерів Групи 7. І це вже традиція, що Україна представлена на таких самітах. Я подякував Японії та пану прем'єр-міністру Кішіді за продуктивне та принципове японське головування в Групі 7. Наступний рік – це головування Італії. Ми вже обговорюємо з Джорджією, пані головою уряду Італії, пріоритети італійського головування. Для мене було важливо подякувати і кожному з лідерів «Сімки» за особисте лідерство. Є і нова потужна заява Групи 7, зокрема, на підтримку України. Багато важливих речей для нашої держави, для наших людей враховані в заяві. Сьогодні я також звернувся до учасників і учасниць конференції у Вашингтоні, присвяченої нашій спільній роботі з Америкою щодо оборонного виробництва. Дуже важливо, що наші домовленості з президентом Байденом поступово реалізовуються. Багато зустрічей у Вашингтоні цими днями у керівника Мінстратегпрому Камишина. Але і це ще не все. Я хочу відзначити також роботу з партнерами в Америці, українських правоохоронців та генерального прокурора Костіна. Вагомі кроки. Сполучені Штати висунули обвинувачення 4 російським військовим, що підозрюються у вчиненні воєнного злочину. Катування громадянина Сполучених Штатів. Для України принципово, щоб кожен злочин російських окупантів був повністю розслідуваний і отримав законне та справедливе процесуальне продовження. Аж до відповідного вироку. І наші інституції разом з партнерами активно працюють щодо цього. Ще одне. Провів нараду з міжнародниками, МЗС, Офіс. Готуємо активне продовження грудня, активний початок наступного року. Україна боротиметься за власні інтереси, за справедливі інтереси кожної вільної нації, бо якщо ми себе можемо захищати, це посилює усіх інших у світі, хто так само, як і ми в Україні, цінує свободу та міжнародний порядок. Я дякую всім, хто б'ється та працює заради України. Слава Збройним силам України, та хай буде світлою пам'ять усіх українських героїв різних часів, які боролися та віддали своє життя, щоб життя України збереглося. Слава Україні!
And Heroam Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 651 of the news. And it's time for us to move on into the next part of the stream. We get to talk to all of y'all for about the next hour. Not 30 minutes, A whole hour. And we got a lot to talk about. And also, I got to thank everyone so much for being here with us so far and hitting the like button tonight. If you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure to hit it. It helps us to spread out our news to a few more people. YouTube doesn't really promote us much anymore. So, you know, we really just are, you know, just here. But we do love if y'all hit the like button. It makes us feel good and it makes us happy to know that people do enjoy what we do. And so that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping right into our final poll and question segment of the night, we have 2 more polls to address. And the first one says, if Putin were to take Ukraine, hypothetically speaking, do you think he would stop there or take over more countries? 63% said yes, non-NATO countries would be next. 21% said yes, NATO countries would be next. 11% said no, Putin would stop in Ukraine. And 5% said unsure. And on this one, I gotta say that I am not very convinced that if Putin were to hypothetically take Ukraine, which I don't think he'll ever do, if he were to do that, he would definitely not move into a NATO country, because that would be essentially putting Russia on the path for a very bad fate, to say the least. Now, moving on to a non-NATO country, that would also be a stretch as well, because Russia is going to be so depleted by the time the Ukraine war is over. They're going to be basically in shambles, no matter if they win or lose. Either way they go, they're going to be in a bad shape, and they really won't have anywhere else to go to even take over another country. So I think they would stop for a long time so they can regroup their military. But, you know, the bottom line is they're not going to take Ukraine. Ukraine is going to keep their country. They're going to win, and I think that's the way it's going to end. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say they probably would want to try and move on to other NATO countries, but they probably aren't going to have the abilities to do it. One thing that's for sure at this point, whether support for Ukraine ended and Ukraine somehow ended up losing, or if the support picks back up again and they, you know, continue on to win like we know they will, the Russians are so severely depleted militarily at this point, it will be a good decade until they ever even get close to being a shadow of what they formerly were. So I would say that they're probably not going to be moving on to any NATO countries next soon. It would be the next thing they did, but it would be a long time down the road, maybe 10 years or so. Still don't think that's a good thing that we're putting a 10-year timer on most likely a world war with Russia, but you know, that's probably the reality we would be looking at if the Russians did end up winning in Ukraine, is that it would be about 10 more years or so until they could ever try anything against NATO, and even then, they probably have a pretty good understanding it would not go well. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And you know, something I just realized when you said that Russia has been depleted to a point that is so desperate that they're in such bad shape, they really can't even attack anything else. You know, in reality, the West's goal of depleting Russia, that was pretty much their goal the whole time. By supplying Ukraine, they were helping protect Ukraine, but mainly we were trying to wear down Russia to take away their stockpiles. And right now, I would say it's pretty much mission accomplished. And I wonder if that's part of the reason why aid to Ukraine is starting to get held up, because the politicians and the people in charge realize that our mission has been accomplished, and all of a sudden now we're getting a little bit shy on the aid.
That may be the case. That's actually an interesting idea there, is that we, like many people have been insisting, America doesn't want Ukraine to win the war. They just want them to weaken the Russians. And that may be a motivator for some of these, you know, who appear to have been vehemently pro-Ukrainian politicians to now kind of start waffling on being so vehement. That may be the case. But we don't really, you know, we don't know exactly, but that's still an interesting theory right there as to why the support seems to kind of be, you know, winding down a little bit, like we're seeing right now in the United States. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, I see Rob Eisman said something very interesting there. We'll probably circle back around to that and address that here in a little bit. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, in our next poll, the last one says, the U.S. has decided that striking the Houthis in Yemen right now is the wrong course of action. And what are your thoughts? 41% said that is a bad decision by the USA. 25% said that's a smart decision by the USA. 20% said, it seems weak, but acceptable. And 14% said unsure. And on this one, I got to say, to me, I think striking the Houthis would probably be a good idea. We went over that at pretty at depth last night, if I can actually speak. And I would say that striking them would probably be the better solution, because they did fire missiles at commercial vessels and also at or around Navy vessels as well. And that should carry a response with it. And it appears like they're saying that's the wrong course of action. It'd be nice if they explain that a little bit further, because, you know, I don't really understand the logic or reasoning behind it, and I'm not sure if they do either. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, first, not getting into politics. So we're not addressing this from a political level. I have to say that because it's always important to me, and I don't mean to get on a soapbox and lecture, but there are people who are always wondering, why do I never get into politics? While I want to become the president in 2040, and many of y'all know about that ambition of mine, I can't stand politics. That's why I'm getting into politics. I want to be what I would like to see in politics, not what I'm seeing right now. I don't really like any of them. I don't really support any of them. Honestly, if you want to know my real opinion, I honestly dislike all of them equally because they're all kind of a little questionable. But getting on into what's happening right now, I don't think this is a good move. This looks weak. I mean, this is incredibly weak. What we're talking about are a group of people in Yemen who are a faction in a civil war, much like the faction that we've been supporting in Syria, which is the Syrian Democratic Forces against the Assad regime. We've supported them without question, and it's ended up going pretty okay. Now we're going to act like we can attack the Houthis, which are very similar to ISIS or Al-Qaeda or the Assad regime, and we're going to act like we can't touch them? I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. They're attacking international shipping. They're attacking ships of our friends, pretty much for the most part. They've attacked British ships. They've attacked ships flagged by multiple different nations. They have sent drones and missiles directly aimed at our own vessels. This does not look like a good move to me. It does not at all. It looks weak because it's showing that even lower level people, we seem apprehensive to respond to at this point. I get it if the United States wants to tiptoe around the Chinese and, deal with that situation with a great deal of fragility, because it is a fragile situation. There's a lot at stake there. There are tens of trillions of dollars at stake in a situation like that. Not only that, there are hundreds of millions, if not billions of lives that would be affected by decisions in that role. But in Yemen, and for most people around the world, in such a far-flung corner that really is only influenced by Iran, it makes no sense at all to say we're not going to touch them. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I'll have to be honest with you all, I think that was a very weak move, and it's starting to show to many of the larger power players out there, we're scared to even to even lift a finger against small players like the Houthis. Like, if we're not going to respond to the Houthis, who do we respond to at this point? And anyone, for that matter? I don't know. Because, and I see people saying we'll deal with it covertly. That's not the way we should deal with things always, is covertly. Sometimes we need to be very open with what we do. And I think this is one of those perfect times. The Houthis act like they're a legitimate government of Yemen, although they are an unofficial terrorist organization that operates in Yemen like a government. I don't like that. I just don't like the idea of them sitting there and just letting them get away with doing something like that. They attacked our ally ships. They attacked our ships unsuccessfully, but the fact still stands. They seized commercial ships. They're currently sitting in Al Hudaida right now. That we should not be letting this stuff slide. It's a bad look. And I'm going to tell y'all this. Y'all will see in a little bit, this is going to be a pretty bad look. I would assume that, hell, maybe even this might start, like many, there are a lot of people out there, I'll tell you this, there are a lot of people out there, whenever a decision's made, like with the Chinese, to kind of tiptoe around the situation, there are people who go, it makes us look weak. Not really, because everyone out there who has a brain, they know the Chinese situation is the most severe one we're dealing with right now, and the Russian one is the second most serious. Yemen, though, it's so far down on the list, you could do whatever you want, and you could get away with it. No one's going to care. If you wanted to start bombing out the Houthis, hell, if you wanted to actually put troops on the ground and help the Yemeni government crush the Houthis, no one's going to stop us. And it's also a good way to send a message. It's like, look what we did to this, little guy down here. Look what we did to the Houthis. We'll do that to bigger players as well if we have to. It's a way to send a message. And we're not sending a message right now in that. So I'm not going to get into the whole political side of things. I'm just going to get on to the international diplomacy side of things. That's not a good look to not respond to the Houthis and what they've done. That's just my take, though. If you disagree with that, I mean, hey, you're open to do that. Just, make sure it's respectable. Because, I'm not going to go out of my way to, slash you or anything, or slash your tires if you disagree with me, because, we're not changing anything at the end of the day. You all in the live chat or me here on the show, we're just talking. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I've got to wonder, like, what in the world is up with people tonight, Matthew, and saying this one thing? Like, I've seen you ban 2 separate people for it. Like, what the hell? Where the hell are they even getting that from?
I don't know, man. Like, you know, I would correct the record, but we don't get into politics here. And also, it's none of their business anyway. I can believe what I want.
Yeah,
But, you know, when people resort to name calling and insults because they don't like an opinion, that's when they go. They get the hell out.
Yeah, I was looking at that when it was happening. I was just, watching, and I was like, uh, what the?
I've actually had 4 people tell me that tonight, by the way. 4 people. One of them actually backed off of it and they stayed, but the other 3 went.
What the hell is going on? I'm not getting it, because I don't think you've said anything tonight that's even in that vein. Like, I'm at a complete loss right now. But I think we do a pretty good job. I have to say this, though, in like our defense. I think we do a really good job at making sure to keep politically neutral, because we've been called, let's see, you've been called tonight woke. We've also
I'm not woke, by the way, since the word has been said. I'm not anywhere close to woke.
But we've also been called MAGA, which is the complete opposite. We've been called communists, fascists. I think we've been called about everything under the rainbow at this point. Like, you could come up with anything you want. We've been called it on every single side. So I think we're doing pretty good at going down the middle, down the road, down the middle of the road politically, because it seems as though it just depends on the week. We get framed for being whoever. I mean, this week, apparently Matthew's a communist revolutionary. Next week, he'll be a fascist or something. Who knows? We'll find out.
I'm Matt.
Matt.
But seriously though, I want to make this clear while I'm choking on this gum over here. Just because, you disagree with me or something like that, I'm not going to get upset. And also, you have a perfect right to disagree with me. Put it in the live chat. I actually read all the ones that even aren't favorable to an opinion that I put out there, and I actually consider it. So I'm not just looking at it, thinking, oh, what a dummy, they disagree with me. I actually look at it and think, oh, they might have a good point or a bad point. But the moment someone resorts to insults, that's when it starts going off the rails. And that's typically not a logical person that's lobbing insults. So, feel free to let me know if you disagree. We're both like that.
And it was weird because I saw like 2 people who've been around for a long time getting banned tonight for that. And I don't get it. Like, it's like they've been, the 2 of them in particular that I've seen, it's like, and I know they're still watching because people get banned and then they get pissed off and they want to kill us. And so they just watch the stream forever and just wish death upon us every minute. But since they're watching, why in the world do y'all think tonight was the night that you could just insult Matthew like that? Like, I've made it very clear to y'all that we don't insult y'all don't insult us. We're civil people, on a civil channel. We don't act like crazy rabid animals. We don't do that. So what in the world made y'all think tonight was going to be the night you could just insult Matthew and get away with it? Like, honestly, I don't care if y'all have been around on the channel for 2 years. If you want to be rude to Matthew, I'll see you gone as well personally, and I will never wish for you to be back. That's just rude as hell what y'all were doing and saying, and I don't get where people think they can just get away with doing that all of a sudden, whether you agree or disagree with someone. But
I appreciate you, Enforcer. I appreciate
it. Thank you, because people who can do that, and I'll tell you, I'll be quite clear. I love the Lee Spring Army, love every single one of y'all. But if any of y'all attack Matthew, y'all can attack me all I want. I don't really care. But if you attack Matthew, I'm coming for you. There's no doubt about it. If I see you and he hasn't gotten you yet, I'll get you. Because I'm not letting any of that slide. And look, there was another. I didn't get him in time. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So with that out of the way and all of our polls out of the way as well, we are moving on to our Super Chat questions. And y'all have thrown in a good bit of support tonight. And once again, thank you all very much for that support. And our first one goes to Steve Watkins at work. He is still at work. And thank you very much, Steve, for that support. He throws in a $50 donation and says, thanks for all your hard work, and take a question from the chat, please.
And thank you so much, Steve Watkins at work, for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, thank you for throwing in support and helping us to keep this thing rolling. While our fundraisers are able to raise thousands of dollars, it is a different story in Super Chat support. It is actually kind of getting to the point where we're wondering how long we will be able to be on air. But I got to thank you so much once again for helping us to keep this thing running, and we will make sure to take a question from the chat. And so with that, what do we got?
All right, and our first question from the chat is going to go to, let's see here. It's going to go to Robert Rodriguez, who says, isn't flying into international coordinations or over the ICC districts, doesn't that subject Putin to their jurisdiction?
Yeah, kind of, but each nation gets a lot of leeway in what they do. Being a part of the, Interpol, I think that's what it's called, Matthew, if I'm right.
Interpol is the enforcement, I believe, and the international court itself is the adjudicator. So they hear cases and they decide cases. But the catch is, though, just because someone's flying over international court jurisdiction doesn't mean that they can apprehend the person. They have to get some type of law enforcement agency to actually go apprehend Putin and then bring him to the court, which can hear the case.
And that's pretty interesting. I would have to say that although he did leave the country today, I don't think that there's like a duty, even if a country that he landed in was a part of, say, the international court or was, working with Interpol, they have really no duty to turn them in. And there's really no enforcing power that the Interpol or an international court could have to force a country to turn Putin in. So it's kind of a nation-to-nation instance, whether it happens or not. And I'm sure that Putin wouldn't have even gone to the UAE or Saudi Arabia if they hadn't given him assurances that he wouldn't be arrested if he arrived. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Steve, and also allowing us to address that live chat, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Richard Ager, who puts in a $50 donation. And Richard is another longtime supporter, just like Mark, Steve, and Richard is also another huge supporter as well. And thank you very much for that support once again. And he says, thanks again, gents, and please take a question from the chat.
And thank you so much, Richard Ager, for being one of our Australian viewers. And I gotta thank you for being an Australian member of the Lee Spring Army. It's really cool to know that we have so many Australian viewers, and thank you so much for helping us to keep this channel running. Yeah. You know, it's always interesting, Matthew, how the bots start coming in droves during the question segment.
And you know what's worse? That guy called us boomers, so you know for a fact that he's judging our age by our voices, so he thinks we're 50 years old or something, both of us. And that tells you he hasn't been around for any longer than a day.
And let's see. And also, by the way, like, really quickly, because people, like, one thing I've realized, y'all, and I know this sounds really, this will sound a little bit forward as a concept, but one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people love to run their mouths on the internet, but when you ever see them in public, they talk a lot less. So to that guy, why don't you come down here and say that to our face, because I'm very sure you won't. So, yeah, by the way, if you ever disagree with us to the point you fling insults, that offer is always open. I'll be more than happy to take you up on that. Like, I don't mean to sound like a badass or a hardcore, but when people want to talk crap, I'm not into it. It's like, I don't talk crap. If you want to talk crap, say it to my face. Don't say it over the internet. So with that, moving, go ahead.
I said, tell him.
Tell him. But anyways, moving back to Richard's super chat, which was so rudely interrupted by some idiot. I gotta, well, hang on. Let's see. I gotta thank you so much for the support. Being an Australian viewer, getting back to what I was saying. It's crazy to know that so many of y'all are from Australia, and we even have viewers from Perth, which is on like the far western side of the country, and almost nobody lives there outside of Perth.
With the Quokkas.
But the Cloccas, or the Quokkas, or whatever.
The Cloccas.
The Cloccas, man.
That's what happens when somebody gets a little too mouthy in real life. You're like, hey man, you want to get a Clocka?
But still, I gotta thank you so much once again for the support, Richard, helping this channel to keep on running and enjoying the work. Folks like you help to make this channel possible, and I gotta thank you so much once again, because y'all are the only way we're keeping on air at all. And so with that, let's get a live chat.
And we did get a live chat. Remember, it was the one about the International Court and the Interpol.
Yes, but that was for Steve Watkins. That was not for Richard.
Oh?
Yeah.
I think I mixed up. So let's get another one. This one goes to, let's see here, looking for one that relates to what we're talking about somewhat. I see Andrew in the live chat said, should Australia give its retired fleet of Taipans to Ukraine, or is that too risky?
Taipans. Let me go pull that up. I don't think I've heard of that.
They got a retired fleet of snakes. Would you like a retired fleet of Taipan snake?
Let's see. Japanese, military. Is he talking about like the snake or the something else?
No, he said Australia to give its retired fleet of Taipans to Ukraine.
Let's see. Australian. I don't know where I heard Japanese, but Australian military. Let's see here. The MRH-90. I've never seen this thing before. MRH-90. Let me go pull that up specifically. So, this looks a little bit like... This thing is bizarre. don't even know what this thing is. Let me go read about its development. I'm sorry, y'all. I got to figure this thing out. I'll be honest with y'all. This thing looks like a mix of a Super Puma and a Lynx put together into one. I've never seen this thing before in my life. It actually looks really nice. I would say, why not? I'm sure that more helicopters would help Ukraine in more ways than one. So I would say, yeah, if they're retiring them and they're not going to be using them, why not send them to Ukraine? I'm sure they would help out massively. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat well. Thank you so much once again for the support, Richard, and helping us to keep this thing running, and also allowing us to answer that live chat question. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Nestors, who puts in a 30. And thank you, Nestors, very much for that support. You put that in shekels, I believe it was. So I believe you are in Israel. So shout out to Israel. And Nestors says, thank you for your work. And please take a question from the chat. And leaving for my patrol round and Slawa, Ukraine. And Israel Chai.
And wait a minute, hang on. He's leaving for his patrol.
Yes, so he's definitely in Israel then. He's actually apparently in the military.
Man, my boy is such a my boy here. He's in the forces. I don't know if we can even say that anymore on YouTube, but Nestor's crazy. That is crazy. And I'm wishing you the best of luck. I'm hoping you're safe. I hope you stay safe down there. And isn't it cool to know, y'all? We actually have a real on homesteader here watching the channel. That is so cool. And also, thank you so much for enjoying our work. I know that the segment covering what you folks down there, the homesteaders, are doing is short. But nevertheless, I hope y'all do enjoy that we do have y'all in our thoughts, and we are making sure to keep a little bit of attention going down there. And I got to thank you so much once again just for being here. That is so cool to know that you're in the forces down there, and I hope that you are remaining safe right now. But still, we will make sure to get a question from the chat, and also Slava Ukraini, and Israel Chai. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I think we also got a correction on that tonight from LSA Sergeant Figment, so we will find out later. But
he said Yisrael High. So it's Yisrael High is what he says it is.
Interesting. I'll try and pronounce it that way from here forward. But still, thank you so much once again, Nestor, for being here with us, helping this channel to keep on running, so that way we can continue to stay on air. And so with that, what do we got for a live chat, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question is going to go to Miss Disa, who is also the channel fixer. And hello to you, Miss Disa, and welcome back. And Miss Disa puts in a very good question. She said, you're going to show the rifle of the sniper Vyacheslav Kovalsky.
Vyacheslav Kovalsky. Are you talking about the one that created the longest shot? Let me see. I think it's called Thunder. Let's see. Lord's Thunder, I think it is. Rifle. Let me see here. Dang it. I saw it earlier. I actually pulled it up, but let's see. Dang it. I'm drawing a blank.
I sent the name to your Discord, by the way, so you can just copy and paste, and it should bring up some stuff.
And there's nothing in our Discord that can't be seen at the moment.
Nah, I sent the picture of my drum set in the corner.
Let's see. Let me go put that name over here on the side screen. Right over here. Let's see. And what is his gun? There it is. There's a picture. Horizon's Lord. That's what it was. It did have the Lord's name in it. But let's see. Horizon's Lord. There we go. And let me go get a picture of this baby. And let me see here. Here it is. It is a 50 BMG rifle. That's a picture of it right there. That's a video of it, apparently. Let's take a look at this. So it's a single shot rifle. Jam! Oh my god! Oh, the shoulder is gone. Dude, that thing must be lightweight because the recoil was strong on that one. Damn.
That scope literally like comes back at his face so fast, like it almost looks like it's gonna hit him in the face.
Dude, this thing fires like a Pac 40. This is nuts. Look at that. Oh, there's no extractor. Did you notice that? There's like no extractor. It just kind of falls out of the bottom.
Wait a minute, are you sure about that?
Yeah, look. Like, you know, an extractor, when you pull the bolt back, it would fling the round. That kind of just gently fell out.
I think it got extracted.
Oh, no. I think it's... I don't know. It's well, I mean, you know. But, anyways. It's loading in the third shot. By the way, y'all, this was the rifle that was used to make the world record shot so far of, I think, like 3.6. Well, no, it wasn't 3.6. It was like 2.8 kilometers. It was pretty far. It was almost 3 kilometers. But let's watch that recoil one more time.
That's a 50 cal, isn't it?
Damn, yeah, it's a 50 cal. This thing, according to the specs, is a 12.7 by 99 NATO, which I believe is the dimensions of a 50 BMG round.
Damn, that's a hell of a gun right there.
One hell of a gun, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, this thing is something. Wait, hang on. Is this? Because now it's saying 12.7 by 114. Up here it said, oh, wait a minute. These are the different variants that the version this rifle can come in. It can come in 12.7 by 99, 12.7 by 108, 12.7 by 114 HL, and 14.5 and 23 millimeters. That thing is an anti-tank rifle at that point. Damn, I'd like to see...
Excuse me, sir. Could I get a quote on this? What would be the price?
I think that's a 9mm, and I think that's the 50 BMG, just as a scale comparison kind of thing. But man, what a gun! I mean, that is really impressive.
Wait a minute. Did that say Accuracy International on it? Let's see here. I saw Accuracy International somewhere. You scroll up a little bit. Must have been seeing things. I think the words got jumbled.
Must have been the wind. But anyways, really cool rifle, and a great question, Miss Disa. I was looking at this thing earlier today, and I went, wow, wouldn't that be cool if we could get our hands on one of these and review it? I haven't been able to find them. So, sadly, we won't be able to review it for now. Maybe we will in the future. Because we do know people, by the way, it wasn't 2.8, it was 3.8 kilometers. But we do know people who may be able to get us one or have us the ability to shoot one of these or review it. And I think that would be pretty cool, considering that it has now become the longest range rifle that has been able to make a confirmed hit on a target in history at 3.8 kilometers. What a shot. But with that, I hope that does address that well, because that was largely the question, I think, was the sniper and the rifle he used. Don't really know a lot about the sniper, but we know a little bit more about the rifle, which is pretty freaking cool. But with that, hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for sponsoring a live chat question and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment yet again, who throws in another $20 donation. And thank you very much, Sarge. He says, what are the chances of the AFU getting the Apache or another Western Chopper? And will we see the F-16 before, after, or included in the same aid package? And my wife says, Slav Ukraine. And I say, Israel, hi.
Hi, hello. But still, the chances of Ukraine getting an Apache are actually very low. In fact, I'd say it's probably going to be the toughest thing for Ukraine to get. Now, I'm not saying it's off the list. I'm just saying it would be very, very tough, because we've seen that helicopters in Ukraine aren't doing that well. And while an AH-64D longbow, like, that's an AH-64A, I believe, but here we go. Here's an AH-64D longbow with a longbow air-to-ground radar. It probably would do better than, say, a Ka-52, which has this air-to-ground radar in the nose of the helicopter. This one actually has it over the rotors, meaning that the helicopter can be obscured from view and also out of sight of man pads, but also at the same time still continue to operate and be able to see its targets, which is a really cool feature of the AH-64 that isn't present on helicopters outside of an American design. It could be used. It's just... it's just hard to see it being used, to at least to me personally. It just really seems like no one's a big fan of using helicopters in this war, and it also looks like the Western analysts are questioning the role of helicopters in future modern wars. They were even doing that in the late 80s, in all honesty. People were trying to figure out what is a helicopter going to do, because once the manpad like the Stinger, the Piorans, and the Iglis came around, helicopters really started to lose a lot of what made them so beneficial in earlier wars, because almost nothing could shoot them down, say, except for an anti-aircraft gun emplacement. And so then they started to go, well, how in the world do we make these things usable in a modern war like the 80s, which is 40 years ago? And that's when we saw that everything in the U.S. military ended up getting either cameras mounted above the helicopter blades or air-to-ground radars mounted above the blades. So that way there was no clear line of sight that a manpad would have to the helicopter. At best, they would maybe see the air-to-ground radar, and that's about it. So I think there's a possibility that it could be sent. I don't think it'll be in the same package as the F-16. If this ever gets sent, it would be way late down the road, maybe a year from now or further than that, because I just see it rarely happening. And by the way, if y'all are wondering, like, what am I talking about with the cameras being put above the rotor blades, let me show y'all an OH-58 Kiowa, because, oh, I love these, y'all. I gotta tell y'all, I'm such a fan of these helicopters. Not in service anymore. They were retired recently. They're getting replaced by something else, but this is my favorite Army recon helicopter ever. They're pretty. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I like them.
What's that ball on top of it?
Man, that thing be the camera.
That looks a little bit goofy, I gotta admit.
But it's smart.
Is it like a TV?
No, I mean, like, it's a smart strategy. I mean, you know, it's a smart tactic. Just think
I don't know, man. I'm not buying this one. This one isn't for me.
Oh, so you'd rather have the whole helicopter be clearly seen by a manpad?
I'd rather have an Apache.
Man, I'd rather have I'd rather have an Apache, but I like this thing. They're just cool. And also, by the way, I forgot, this thing can actually carry 4 Hellfire missiles, so it can kind of double down as a very light attack helicopter. It can also carry a, I think it's like a 30mm or a 40mm chain gun, and it can carry, let's see, what is it? HVAR, not HVAR, Hydra rockets. Yeah, it can carry like 14 of them. So it's a pretty cool helicopter. It actually has some utility beyond just being a recon helicopter. But I like them. I think they're neat. Sadly, they were retired, but I think they're cool. And, you know, and no one's going to tell me otherwise, man. I think they're neat. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and kind of talk about how helicopters have changed in modern war and how the U.S. has tried to develop ours to account for that. But I think it will come a lot later. And also, tell your wife that I also said Slava Ukraini. And also, and let me make sure I say this right, Yisrael High. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, y'all know what's up. We're on to the next one.
And up next, we've got another 10 from LSA Sergeant Figment. And this time he says, I don't mean to be that guy, but I am that guy. He says, but when I say Am Yisrael Chai, it's pronounced Am Yisrael High. Just a helpful tip. And I gotta say, LSA Sergeant Figment, that actually was pretty helpful because I knew I was mispronouncing it, but I had no idea how to say it. So thank you very much.
And thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for correcting that, because I've actually been referring back to that super chat all night long to try and get that to be correct in some way or another. We usually mispronounce things a lot. And you could just ask anyone who's been around forever. We've mispronounced everything at some point. But I think you're trying to help us out with that, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all who did try and correct us on how to pronounce things, we would be saying everything wrong. I would still be saying Beirut for bureau. I would be saying the capital of Lebanon every time I wanted to talk about a bureau in the U.S. government. I would be saying the Beirut of printing and engraving. I actually said that at one point. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And Brennan Cahill said, Enforcer, are you eating pizza? No, I'm eating crow. But with that, we're on to the next one.
Eating crow. But anyways, our next one goes to Blue Flam 777 LSA, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much for that support. They said, good evening, the brothers Enforcer. And have you figured out Streamlabs or Stream Elements yet? I hate giving YouTube a third of my hard-earned cash for censorship and shadow banning. And all the best, LSA. And I have looked into it, Blue Flam, but I haven't had the chance to actually integrate it yet into the stream. It looks like it might be a pretty good program. but I need to do a little bit more looking into it first. And also, to be perfectly honest, I'm not happy about YouTube getting a third, especially with them not fixing the polls and not doing some things that they probably should be doing. And they're kind of just sitting back and just, occasionally doing some things that kind of, pisses off a little bit. And then they sort of just keep doing more and more. And I'm not happy with that. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, I'm also not happy with that either. Still, I have to say, I hope that doesn't discourage anyone from supporting our channel because, it's, I'm not
It's the
gonna
only way.
yeah, it's the only way that we can keep the channel running. So, if, people stop supporting the channel, we are going to just shrivel up and die because I'd rather just, not exist as a channel than run ads on our streams. That's really the way I look at it. But still, we have tried to look into it. We're trying to implement it, but we always want to make sure that it's safe because we've never moved outside of anything directly.
Oh, no, it's safe. Like, we want to make that clear up front. Like, Streamlabs itself is a legitimate company and it is safe, but we just hadn't had the chance to implement it yet.
So there we go. That's largely the answer. And some people are saying Venmo. We kind of want to stay away from being like every other Ukraine war YouTuber where they have a PayPal, a Venmo, a Cash App, a Patreon, buy me a coffee. They want you to pay them every single way. I mean, I get it a little bit because support for us is starting to get somewhat low. Like to the point where we are actually asking the question behind the scenes: how much longer will the channel possibly survive? That's something we're looking at, but at the same time, I don't want to make this tacky and practically beg y'all for for money every single night so we can keep this thing running. So that's kind of both sides of the coin right now, but we are looking into it and hopefully we'll have that implemented soon. So that way YouTube isn't taking nearly a third of every single dollar that's coming in and helping us to try and keep this thing running.
I will tell y'all that if we do the Streamlabs or Stream Elements thing, it will change the way we do our super chats just a little bit. Because for y'all to actually do a super chat to donate, y'all will have to go through a link in the description, so y'all can click down there and do it. And it's not going to be through the YouTube UI, so it's going to be a little bit separate. But it does keep track of it the same way, and it goes through their own processing little payment thing. So it will change things slightly, but not in a huge way.
And so with that, I hope that does address that well. I mean, I don't really have much to add. You kind of covered everything, but and also 420 said get a sponsor. I don't want to do that. Like I would rather I want to keep the channel clean. I don't want to be like other channels getting sponsored, by Shave Your Balls or something like that to run the news. It just seems distasteful, especially with the kind of news we cover. I'd just rather it be viewer supported because that's kind of how we started. And nobody, I don't think any viewers. I don't know. I don't know if people take for granted how we run this channel anymore or not. Because if we take on a sponsor, y'all got to understand, we aren't going to be able to be who we are on stream anymore. There's going to be restrictions that these sponsors put onto us about what we can say and not say. They may not like some of the things we do and say, and we're going to have to start changing our behavior and what we do and what we say and what we tell y'all on stream because the sponsor who's actually, footing our bill isn't going to like it. That's kind of why we've wanted to run the channel this way as forever, is because we're not bound by YouTube being unhappy with what we do and curbing, how we support ourselves and a sponsor as well. We haven't had to worry about that. And I don't really want that to be a concern of ours because I have a feeling that the quality of what we can actually cover and the real news that we try and get out is going to drop greatly because of that reason. But with that, hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, huge shout out to Certify, who puts in a $10 donation and does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Certify, for that support. And also, Certify, as many people know, is a longtime channel legend. And thank you very much, Certify, for always sticking around and supporting the channel. And also, real quick, when you said something for us, everybody started saying, "Oh, we are smart. You're smart." And I said, "We are the man of the smart people. The people are LSA are smart." Have you seen that meme?
I think I have. Maybe.
Yes, it's a good one. Y'all got to see it if you have the chance. But anyways, moving on to our next one, we have a $10 super chat from Butchie777. And thank you very much as well for that support. And Butchie says, did Katarov put his son in charge of the new rifle brigade out of jealousy when Prigozhin's son took over the Wagner group? And could there be a pissing contest brewing up between them soon? And Guzalik Verleiken.
And I would say, from what I understand, it may be the case that was done that way because it's very similar in timing. And it's so stupid because it's like Prigozhin's son is just a shoe-in by Putin, just to keep the Wagner somewhat looking like it was. So that is what it is. Maybe it is a pissing contest. I think it may be, actually, because they seem petty enough. I don't think it's going to cause like a little like a civil war in Russia over that or anything like that. But it certainly is going to cause some tensions, that's for sure, if that's what the reason is. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a 2 and says, "I'm cheap. It's my 38th wedding anniversary." And also happy anniversary to you, Margaret.
Happy anniversary. And thank you so much for the support, Margaret. No support is cheap to me. Every single bit of support counts, whether it be $1. $1 may be a lot to one person, and 500 may be nothing to another. We greatly appreciate every single person for helping this channel to keep on running, whether the support be big or small. Even in your own opinion, it is massively appreciated by us. And we are so blessed to know that so many of y'all have helped this channel to keep on running for so long. And also, I hope you have a great anniversary. I know you've already gotten off at this point because I saw that a little bit earlier. But thank you so much once again for helping this channel to be possible. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. You go have a fun anniversary and tell us about it when you come back. Tell us how fun it was. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, huge shout out to Santa Nick. He put in a $50 donation. That's his first ever super chat on the stream. And Santa has arrived. And it's not Christmas, but Santa is here. And thank you very much for that very generous support. And Santa, you are funding crowdfunded news. Thank you very much, Santa. I didn't know Santa was focused on international events, but Santa is here and he's saving the day. And thank you very much. And ho, ho, ho.
And thank you so much for the support, Santa Nick. The first super chat that you've ever thrown in. And I got to thank you so much for that. And I got to thank you for helping us to keep this thing running. Because without folks like you, it would not be possible. I say that almost so much, I bet it just sounds like white noise to everyone. But when I say that, it is entirely serious. I know it's never happened before. But, without viewer support, this channel would seriously just cease to exist. We wouldn't be able to run. Because we, of course, like everyone else, have to pay bills. And you're helping us to be able to pay those bills and get through the Christmas months. And so thank you so much once again. And I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got one from Richard Ager once again. This time he puts in the 20. And a huge shout out to you, Richard, for the second or third support of the night. He says, "Would you go to Rumble?" I'm not sure if you want to answer this one.
Let's see. What's the best way to explain that? YouTube, as we all know, has a certain political leaning. We all know that. I don't think, I don't think it's something that is a surprise to anyone. But Rumble also has the same thing. It just kind of goes in a little bit of a different direction. And we go from one thing to really the same thing, just a little different, just in a different direction. And also on top of that, I wouldn't really like to try and uproot the entire Lee Spring Army and move them to another platform. Because, we kind of started on YouTube. We're here on YouTube. I like to stay on YouTube because that's where many of y'all got to know us, who we were, and what we were doing. So it's a good idea, but largely I would generally want to avoid going to a place like Rumble. And then there was some other thing that already went defunct. I forgot what the name of it was.
Parler?
Yeah, Parler. That was around for a few months or something. I don't know how long. And then there's some people said Twitch. Twitch would murder us. I'm not even kidding. We would go over there to Twitch. We would show one war clip. We would get banned on the spot. So we can't even go over there either. So, we're kind of stuck over here eating crow a little bit. But it's what we have to deal with. We try our best. We continue to fight the good fight every day, trying to get the news out. And while other people have actually curbed their news where it's not actually showing out what's going on, it's more so just them talking about it. I'd rather just face the storm, although we, kind of complain about it a little bit. I'd still rather just face it and try and get the real news out to y'all than, what would appease a sponsor or YouTube AdSense. But with that, I hope that does...
Are you saying that Rumble makes you a little bit rumbly in the tummy?
Yeah, I would actually say so. That was a good joke, but I would actually say so in all seriousness. It seems to me, I don't know, Maddie, I haven't really looked into Rumble that much, but to me, it actually looks like Rumble is the same thing as YouTube, it's just the opposite direction. So, you know, you're not really getting anything better, you're just kind of switching out one bad thing for another bad thing.
From what I've seen, I'll say that Rumble might, you know, appear to lean that way, but I think Rumble's goal is to simply be neutral. But it started off with its marketing ploy being kind of targeted at the other political side, but I don't think that was its focus, nor do I think that's going to be its focus. But they had to do that to kind of, you know, get some traction. But I think it's kind of neutral.
Yeah, well, you know, maybe I'll have to look into it a little bit more, but I don't think we're going to be going over there. And a lot of people are like, no, don't go over there. Nah, we wouldn't, because a lot of, like, one thing we've also found out is that no matter how many times we put out like announcements, like we're not going to be on tonight, you know, well, I'm not saying that tonight. I'm just using that as an example. Like, we could say we're going to take a break for Christmas. We're going to take a break for Christmas. We can say that for a month. We can put that on our Twitter. We can put that on our community post. We can say it in like 30 streams, and then there will still be people asking where we were on Christmas. No matter how hard we try, some people might not get like the message or the memo because it just doesn't make it to them, because YouTube doesn't make it where it's easier. They might miss that part of the stream where we say that, you know, who knows? It's just very hard to get out like consistent messaging to everyone that's in the Leaf Spring Army. That would also pose an issue because, like, while maybe like a few thousand people will know about us moving to Rumble, almost the entire Leaf Spring Army probably wouldn't know, because they would have never gotten the message, because it simply wouldn't have reached them. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support and the suggestion. It's an honest suggestion, and I thank you so much for it. But that's my kind of stance on leaving YouTube. I would rather not. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rotormax, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Rotormax, for that support. And he says, I hope you stay ad-free.
And thank you so much, Rotormax, for the support and hoping we stay ad-free. With folks like you supporting the channel and helping us to make it possible, we will be, well, actually, we will stay ad-free. Like, the best way for me to answer that question is we will stay ad-free permanently. Really, the thing with viewer support is whether we're on air or not, because no matter how low viewer support gets, even to the point where we have to possibly just stop running the channel and go, you know, actually find another job, I'm never going to run ads. Like, I'm just very clear on that. And also on top of that, we aren't going to beg viewers for support either. Like, I'll say that we're having a rough time, but I'm not going to sit there and make a video like other people have where I go, I'm going broke, you know, please give me money, because I don't like the look of that either. I'm not going to beg. You know, and at the same time, we're also not going to run ads either. If the support dries up, that's just that. I mean, you know, and that's the end of the channel. You know, and some people are going to say, hey, he's holding the channel hostage on viewer support. If you want to look at that way, yeah, or you can look at it as, you know, we're doing this as a job, and if we can't pay bills, hope thoughts and prayers aren't paying our bills. We have to pay for law school tuition. We have to pay for rent. We have to pay, you know, insurance and everything else like everyone else does. So if we can't support the channel, if we can't support ourselves doing this, we can't do it. You know, we have to go and actually spend, you know, like 60 hours a week doing something else that does pay bills. But with that, hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for helping the channel to keep on running, Rotormax, because with support like yours, we will be able to keep it running. While I just stutter my way through that and heard Matthew laugh.
Rotor-Rat.
Rotor-Rat? No,
Rotormax.
Keep it still. Thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Butchie777, who throws in yet another super chat. And huge shout out to you, Butchie, for putting in another 20. Huge shout out. And Butchie says, just want to keep you guys on stream and in succulent pizza. The LSA is awesome.
And thank you so much. The LSA is awesome. And I got to thank you so much for the support, Butchie777, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And so thank you so much once again for helping us to keep this stream alive, because viewer support like yours is the only thing that makes it possible at all. And so with that, hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I'm going to run this poll just out of curiosity.
I know it's
not saying we're going to do it.
I know what it's about, and I have to say this really quickly. And by the way, if you see the poll right now, this is not going to be a binding poll, and it's not actually seriously asking the question. But we're probably never going to have memberships. Y'all can answer it how y'all want, but we're probably never going to have memberships just because I have like an aversion to how it looks. But with that,
I'm just curious personally, because me personally, I think the memberships are kind of tacky. That's why, the enforcer obviously has the call on it. He's the one who makes the decision. But just on my opinion, it seems kind of tacky, and I've seen other channels do it. And, to me, it seems like the super chats are the better way to do it, because it's kind of making everybody on a level playing field. You can put a super chat in and we answer every single one of them, no matter what amount of money you put in. But, memberships do have their merits, but I just personally don't see it. But let's see what y'all say.
And so we will. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Neil Vizinant, who puts in the 5 and says, sorry for low support. And Neil, don't worry about it. Every single support literally adds up. Thank you very much. And he says, it's for the holidays, or it is the holidays, and just hold on. And Matt hasn't answered my question yet, LOL, JK. And Neil, what was your question? Are you being serious?
And also, if we haven't gotten that question, Neil, make sure to send it back in, because I don't think we got it. But I do thank you so much for the support. And by the way, really quickly, everyone, I also have to say this, because we've seen, once again, a few people are getting a little bit miffed that we're not answering their live chat questions. We get at least, I think at this point, 14 to 15,000 live chat messages a night during a stream. We can't answer all of them. And you can send in a question like once every day for 5 days straight. We may not ever get to it because there are so many questions being asked. It's impossible to get to them all. So don't take that personally. Don't take that as us ignoring y'all, because people eventually do take it as that. We're not ignoring y'all. It's just that we have so many questions to try and answer that out of the pool of them all, it's somewhat of a slimmer chance that we'll get to a particular live chat. But still, no pressure at all, Neil. I hate even saying anything about the support side of things, because it does put pressure on people to support the channel, and we don't want to do that. It's either people support the channel or they don't, and we're here or we're not. But I do thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and making it possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, whether the support be a $500 super chat or whether it even be just a $1 super chat, every little bit counts, and every little bit helps us to keep this thing rolling. And so thank you so much once again, and I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and we're out of super chat questions. So once again, thank you all very much for that support. And real quick, let's see what y'all said on this poll. And it says, just out of curiosity, with the asterisks around it, are you in favor of YouTube memberships? 73% said no, and 27% said yes. And that is actually exactly where I thought it would fall. So no is by far the prevailing option, and I would personally have to agree with that. But Enforcer, what say you? And also, we do need to get some live chat questions as well. Also, the Morse
live chat, but I'm over
here like salivating, like I saw like pizza in front of my desk or something like that. I'm like, why am I over here like drooling literally for like food right now?
Well, I mean, I'm a little hungry too. I'm not going to lie, but I like to see that the community is largely not behind. Well, yeah, not behind the idea of having memberships. I think they're tacky. I think it starts creating a hierarchy in the live chat of who's what, and I don't like that much. I mean, like you can put in a $500 super chat. I do not think that as viewers that makes that person more important than the person putting in the $1 super chat. We like to look at everyone equally in the Lee Spring Army, regardless of whether the support is huge or little. And I feel like with memberships, the entire point is to make people feel like they're not as good as that guy with like the #1 tag beside his name that's like paying like $100 a month membership or something. I don't like that, and it makes the live chat like a place where there's ranks and people don't feel like they can go against the main guy who's paying the most in membership support. I don't like that stuff. Like, I want y'all to be free to say what y'all want, to agree, to disagree, of course, civilly. I feel like that kind of kills that. And also, it's really tacky looking because we're talking about a war, and and we kid about it, and we make it very light, and we make it a joke, but it is a war, and like I do understand that at the end of the day, and we always want to make sure that things are still tasteful in that regard. And I don't like the idea of having a sponsor for 1,300 people dying, and I don't like the idea of having a sponsor for say well, not a sponsor, but memberships on something like this. It just doesn't seem right. If we were in another category, I would consider it to be fine, but we're not. We're in a war category, and I feel like it's a very distasteful thing to do those kinds of things while covering a war. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on into the Morse code message and some live chats. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and also shout out to Teslands, who puts in a $1 New Zealand dollar, and thank you very much for that support. And also, our Morse code decoders tonight was the whole roster: Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Benu, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, and I don't think we had Toxic Bananas, actually, so it wasn't the full roster, but we almost had the full roster. They said the Morse code today reads, beep, beep, ... Long live the LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that thing dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night, and I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct again on the 651st day of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the first question goes to Neil Vizinant, who says, would it be a war crime to send Chris's mom to the Russian army to entertain them and get them sick with some disease?
That's a biological weapon. That would be a war crime. So I would say yes, Chris's mother is a war crime. And so I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Don Remint, who says, what if a body double of Putin were assassinated while at a public event? What would follow, and what would actually happen?
Probably just be chaos. I would be honest, it would probably end up a lot like the assassination of Kennedy. It would just be a lot of chaos. They'd drive him off or wheel him away or something, and then announce he's dead. That would probably be what would happen, in my opinion. But you never know. It could.
Oh, I think he means like what would happen. Like, would Russia go to war over it or something like that?
Oh, I thought you meant like what would actually happen on the spot. But if he got assassinated, probably wouldn't go to war. It wouldn't be anything rash. They probably just have him replaced or something and then try and figure out what would be happening from there. Or there would be a power struggle that would come in, one or the other. But I don't think they would lash outwards outside of Russia immediately. But with that, hope that
would be kind of weird, though, because if they killed a body double, then the real Putin would have to go away, or otherwise they'd know that there were body doubles and it was fake the whole time. So essentially killing a body double is like killing the real guy, isn't it?
I mean, kind of. Maybe, but then at the same time, I think at that point, if someone tried to assassinate a body double, I think Putin would just be like, "Yeah, that was a body double," and and then they'd be like, "Oh," because like I don't think Putin would give up power because some random guy who looked like him died. Like I don't think that would happen. So
maybe not. I mean, they don't really have any scruples or anything. I guess they would probably just say, screw it, I'm just gonna stay.
Yeah, he would just be like, yep, that wasn't me. That was a body double. I'm still here. And then everyone would be like, oh, they really were body doubles. And that would probably be like the realization. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is a $2 super chat from Barry Woodward, who says, how does Inzi make a comment with 1? My min is 2.
That's a good question, Barry. I don't know. We've actually seen some super chats that are 99 cents. We don't ever know how those come in because I always thought the minimum was $1. But we still greatly appreciate everyone for the support, whether it's 99 cents or $500. We still greatly appreciate everyone for helping this channel to keep on running. And I don't know. Like, that's a good question. Maybe they're like, I don't know, maybe YouTube is like, oh, Americans, they can shell out an extra $1. But then with like New Zealanders, they're like, well, $1's good. I don't know. That's a good question. I would take that up with YouTube because I wouldn't know why they have a different rule for New Zealand versus America. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we got a question from Willie, who says, why didn't the UAE or Saudi Arabia enforce international law and arrest that war criminal?
Probably because they had a pre-agreed arrangement where they wouldn't. Of course, it's kind of up to each country if they want to have the guy arrested or not. And I'm sure that Putin wouldn't have traveled there if they were going to arrest him. So I'm sure there was a pre-arranged agreement, and that's why they didn't arrest him. Beyond that, I can't really get into like the diplomatic side of things or why they'd even allow that, because the guy is reprehensible. So I don't even know why they would allow it. But we can't, at the same time, I know some people are going to be like, sanction UAE, sanction Saudi Arabia. We've got to play it a little carefully because there is a diplomatic game at play here in between the United States and Russia. And if we shun them, they are going to go to the Russians. And we don't want that. We want them to stay in our sphere. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rob Marston, who puts in a 20 Australian. And thank you very much, Rob, for that support. He says, for Chris's mom's plane fare to Ukraine.
And Rob, I'm sorry, but Chris's mom can't fly on a plane. She's simply too fat. It would make the plane crash. She would actually have to take She would either have to take the Greyhound bus, which she's very familiar with the bus station, or she would have to take the train. She's also very familiar with trains, having many of them run around her. But anyways, with that...
And,
But with
and
that...
also, Rob's trying to end up at The Hague by transporting a chemical or a biological weapon to the war zone. Rob, watch out.
Rob! Rob is creating an international incident as we speak, putting that thing on a plane. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Rob, and help the channel to keep on running. Because always like you make it possible for us to roast Chris's mom. And it's not Chris Cooper's mom. Chris Cooper's great. It's the one we banned like days ago. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, shout out to Barry Badranoth once again for putting in a 2 and says, take a chat from the live chat, guys, and we shall. And this one goes to Paul Hurl, who says, any updates on the Challenger 2 combat status?
Combat status, they are operational in the field. One has been destroyed out of the 14 that are there, but beyond that, we haven't really seen them used much. Like, to be entirely honest. Like, they seem to be in a reserve unit in the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, and they're not really being used a lot in active frontline service from what we can tell. If they were being used in frontline service, the Ukrainians would have videos of it, and we would be seeing them. We don't see that a lot, and it looks like they're using them as reserve vehicles. So with that, I hope that does address what we understand combat operationally about the Challenger 2. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Old Buzzard, who says, is there any movement or way the U.S. is transferring the hijacked weapons taken at sea, speaking of the enforcement of arms to Yemen, since we now know that we're sort of attacked to Ukraine?
From what we understand, whenever we seize weapons at sea, they're actually brought back to the United States and stored here until we figure out what to do with them or destroy them. That's what I know, because we ended up actually taking some of the seized weapons from years ago that we had taken from Iran that was, taken from a ship. And we ended up taking it and transporting it from an armory in the U.S. to Ukraine and allowing them to use the equipment. So we're probably going to bring it back here. That's my best guess. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we're going to get this too from Neil Vizanon, who said, no, Putin would say, I'm back from the dead. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think he would give up power. I think he would be like, that was a body double. I'm not leaving. That thing was fake. And I think that's what he would do. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And Matthew, you can say something to Putin about his body doubles and Chris's mom, and it would mean pretty much the same thing. You know what it is?
What's that?
Are these real?
Oh.
But anyways,
Putin would say, what was that thing? That body double, that thing.
Oh, that vile thing. Oh, goodness. But with that, it is time for us to get on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Trader Den, which also happens to be the place that guy that Ukraine knocked off happened to frequent quite a bit, Trader's Den. But thank you very much for the good question. And it says here, what are y'all's thoughts on the Venezuela-Guyana situation happening right now?
I've heard a little bit more about it. Apparently, Venezuela is wanting to annex about half of Guyana for just because it's contested areas. Very questionable, and I would say that's in violation of sovereignty of a nation's borders, which should be detested internationally, and I believe that there should be a response in the protection of Guyana's national sovereignty and their current standing borders. That would be my opinion. We have heard that apparently Brazil is possibly getting in the mix and threatening to maybe take military action against Venezuela to enforce Guyana's borders. We'll have to wait and see if that's even true or not. I'll have to look a lot more into the situation. But I would say that it is a blatant violation of international law. It's an illegal invasion, and it should be denounced just like the Russian invasion of Ukraine was. Because, that should be equal across the board. Invading people's countries and trying to take their land ought to be frowned upon. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And that was the final question of the night. I got to thank all of y'all so much once again for being here with us tonight and watching the stream. If y'all have enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button. We've gotten up to 2017 likes. Hey, that's a good year. That was the year that I was in like my junior year of, well, my sophomore year of high school. But if y'all have enjoyed, hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to comment. Make sure to do all of those fun things, because this channel is a great place to be, and the Leaf Spring Army is absolutely wonderful. And so with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini. God bless Israel, God bless the United States, and long live the Leaf Spring Army. The Leaf Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. Thank you all for another great stream. Slava Ukraine, Slava Israel, and also, good night.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.